There were strange creatures in the world that looked very different from ordinary people. People called them monsters. A man fought one of them, defending himself with a shield from the troll's large club. Enemies that threatened all living things with their ferocious nature and enormous strength, instilling fear in all who saw them. The archer in the knight's team gave the command to his allies, then drew his bowstring. Another archer prepared for battle, protecting a girl with the appearance of a dog who was preparing a spell. And suddenly, on a single command, 3 long-range masters unleashed a barrage of attacks on the monster. Such a powerful attack produced the desired result, killing the vile monster. The commander caught his breath, praising his allies and asking if anyone was injured. Everything was fine, and some even managed to level up for killing the enemy. The commander turned to the knight, thanking Marin, and adding that it was indeed calmer with the vanguard in the group. Suddenly, Marin grabbed a dagger and began searching the troll's corpse, causing the commander to feel disgust at what he was doing. Not for the first time. The knight severed the troll's arm, lightly removing the bristles from the monster's limbs. He then drained the blood and rubbed the hand with spices to remove the foul odor emanating from the troll's body. Soon Marin placed the monster's arm on a cutting board and cut the cooked meat into small pieces. While the knight was frying the meat with noodles, his allies continued to express their dissatisfaction as they could not get used to such cooking. The girl did not understand why Marin made such food for himself when they had normal food. The mage added that the world is huge and everyone has different tastes. Besides, Marin tried to make it tasty. The final touch was a little bit of greens, and in the end, the knight ended up with troll pasta. The girl wanted to know if it was really tasty, but when Marin offered her a taste, she immediately waved him off in horror. Marin continued to eat. He really did think it was delicious, but the people of this world simply did not understand how good this food was. The rich flavor and juice of the orc meat had no unpleasant smell. The texture was tender and melted in the mouth. The noodles and cream swirled together, enhancing the flavor. His allies continued to marvel at how blissful Marin looked as he ate the troll meat. Suddenly, the commander changed the subject, reminding them of the recent news about the hero who had disappeared some time ago and whose body had recently been found. The body was found in the Tirsan forest in the south. This came as a surprise to the archer, as she had recently passed through there. The mage was horrified. The missing hero had shown great promise, and she couldn't believe that anyone could have defeated such a strong man. Maroon continued to eat, but wondered how terrifying the monster that lived there must have been. The girl turned to the knight and asked Marin why he had started eating monsters in the first place. 3 months ago, in a small village in the south, the news that regular flights had been cancelled spread throughout the village. The reason was that a red boar had appeared, and the flight had to be cancelled ahead of schedule. The owners of the carriages refused to go anywhere, while this wild monster was rampaging on the road. The carriage that managed to return yesterday was in terrible condition. The horse and its driver were exhausted and could barely move, and the carriage was held together with its last ounce of strength so as not to fall apart. The drivers refused to leave the city in the near future, and the other drivers had the same story. One of the drivers did not know what to do. Even if they refused to take passengers on this trip, there were only 3 days left before the order had to be delivered to the nobleman. The man clutched his head, remembering his client, the nobleman. If they were late, they would have a lot of problems. Marin tried to find a carriage for himself, but the cab driver didn't care about his circumstances and told him to find another carriage. Other carriers noticed the knight, saying that he looked worn out, but surely strong, but he didn't care about his equipment at all. The man added that they couldn't afford to be picky about who they hired if he was short on money. On the contrary, it would be easier to hire him. The carrier turned to the knight, saying that he had noticed him looking for a carriage and wanted to know where he was going. Marin revealed that he was heading east to Adram. The man offered to take him along with the trade caravan. The transportation fee was optional. The knight simply had to guide them along the way, and they would also provide him with food. The knight wanted to clarify that the other carts had remained in the village. The man replied that the situation was dangerous, and they had to leave urgently. In the end, the knight agreed, because the merchant convinced him that Marin also had urgent circumstances, and that it was worth helping each other. The carrier added that he would try to gather as many fellow travelers as possible before noon, so Marin would have to wait a little. The merchant wanted to get to know the knight, whose name was Mahan. The main character settled into the cart and revealed that his name was Marin Glass. Mahan turned to the second carrier, assuming that Marin was a deserter, but he didn't care, as long as he knew how to fight monsters. If the merchant was so worried, the carrier told him to hire even more mercenaries to protect himself from monsters and the strange knight. Marin fell asleep, and in his vision, he saw a corpse in front of him, wondering why the hero had died so absurdly. The young man was overcome with fear, for a huge monster appeared behind him and was approaching. He screamed that he didn't want to die, praying to return alive and reach Adorama. Mahan began to shake the knight, not realizing that he was asleep. After waking Marin, the merchant apologized and said that he had not noticed him immediately because of his helmet. In fact, the merchant wanted to know where Marin was going, because the conversation had turned to that, with some mercenaries going to Helm and others to Adorama.
The main character replied that he was going to visit his family at the St. Rhea shelter, as it happened that he had not been there for a very long time.
The mercenary wanted to know what level Marin was at, because he looked quite strong. The knight did not understand what he was talking about, but the man said that it was easier to work when he knew the strength of his partner. Level is a number that shows his strength through the window of the mind. The man began to boast, saying that he was as high as level 23, adding that Marin was still far from that. Maroon wanted to say that he was at level 95, but a sharp jolt of the carriage interrupted the dialogue. The reason for the stop was the very monster that was already rushing towards the carriage, destroying everything in its path. The mercenary got out of the carriage and told everyone to get ready for battle. They had to get the red boar away from the carriage before it got too close. Marin looked at the red boar and noticed that it looked strange, although this was to be expected. As its name suggested, it was just a red boar. According to the mind's eye, the boar had a level of 62, an attack power of 426, and a defense of 690. The main character decided that this monster would be suitable for testing, after which he took out his sword and began to walk towards it. The mercenary was afraid for Marin, asking him what he was doing, because going alone against such a beast was a direct path to death. In the next moment, the huge boar that had destroyed many carts was cut in two. Marin did not fully understand the boar's strength, while the other mercenaries and merchants rushed to rejoice. The main character did not understand how he was able to kill the boar. Even with the difference in levels, one blow should not have been enough. The mercenary began patting the knight on the shoulder, praising his skills, because he had cut the red boar in two with one blow. The man wanted to know if Marin was an elite knight from the capital, to which he received a negative answer. Patting the main character on the back, the man heard Marin's stomach growl, saying that anyone would be hungry after such a battle. Towards evening, the wagon stopped to regroup, and the mercenaries began to light a fire. The other mercenaries wondered who this guy in armor was, and why he was hiding his face in such cheap gear. Mahan believed that the old sword could be a legendary artifact. The girl replied that if he was interested, he could ask him himself. The girl turned to Mr. Marin, but only gusts of wind remained after him. The main character returned to the cart, dragging the body of a red boar behind him. The girl immediately wondered why he had brought the carcass to the table. Marin replied that he thought it would be better with meat. In the end, the monster had to be carried away, and the man told Marin that no matter how hungry he was, it was not worth dragging monsters to the dinner table. The main character lifted the spoon to taste the soup prepared by the adventurers. But as soon as he tasted it, Marin felt nauseous, threw down his spoon, and covered his mouth. At that moment, the others were enjoying the potatoes that dissolved in the warm soup, but Marin didn't understand if it was supposed to be delicious. The girl said that here it was considered a royal dinner, but did the knight really expect steak on a silver platter? She didn't understand how the main character could call the soup disgusting, but earlier wanted to feast on a poisonous boar. The main rule with monster corpses is to take only valuable materials. The rest should be burned as soon as possible. For ordinary adventurers, it is better to die of hunger than to eat such things. The girl said that the road to Adorama was long, so Marin had to eat the soup, even if he didn't like it. The adventurers called the archer over to help them light a fire, because the boar carcass wouldn't catch fire. The archer approached and asked the adventurers to step aside, as she could do everything herself. Marin, watching this, wondered why they had asked the archer to light the fire. The archeress held out her hand, and her palm burst into flames, covering the carcass with bright flames. The man noticed that magic was indeed a useful thing, thinking that he too should learn it. The archer replied that magic was not so easy to master, and that it was of little use. Marin asked the girl if she was from the Tower of Magicians. The archer was surprised, and asked him what the Tower of Magicians had to do with anything. The main character asked this question, because most magicians come from there, which is why he asked it. But the girl did not consider herself a magician, as she was just an archer. The archer said that anyone could do such a simple thing, not just a mage, but it takes at least 3 years to learn basic magic. The girl saw Marin's surprise, and asked him what era he was from. Basic magic is now standard for adventurers. Going a little deeper into the forest, the girl showed the hero a city in the distance that was full of lights. Each lantern was equipped with a magic stone instead of a lamp. The archer was surprised that Marin had never seen such a thing before, adding that it was still rare in villages. Now, even children's toys worked on magic. When the main character was little, this was not the case. The man smelled meat, hoping it was pork and not monster meat. The adventurer offered to cut him a piece to try. He thought that the adventurer wanted to kill him, because they had agreed to eat meat after work. Soon the cart reached eastern Adorama, and the merchant thanked Marin for helping everyone by killing the boar. The adventurers and merchants continued to thank Marin, but he was confused, not knowing what to say. The man in the helmet was surprised that Marin really hadn't eaten anything. The adventurer replied that he had tried, but he had thrown up because he wasn't used to it, so he just drank water. The man suggested that it was some kind of illness. The blonde man replied that this was why he couldn't take off his helmet. Mahan handed the bag to Marin, hoping he would accept it as a token of gratitude. The main character was surprised, saying that they had not agreed on this. The main character was forced to accept the gift, as it was the least he could do for Marin's valiant deed. The bag turned out to contain a pile of potatoes, and when Marin opened it, he was not very happy with this find. Marin continued on his way, throwing the food he didn't need right in the middle of the street. A lot had happened, but he finally returned to his hometown, eastern Adorama. Surprisingly, the cityscape seemed unfamiliar. On his way through the city, Marin noticed a familiar bakery, which was still crowded with people. This reminded him that his favorite home, St. Rias' shelter, was just around the corner. As soon as Marin arrived there, he saw that instead of the shelter that had once been there, there was now a toy store. The main character thought that he had taken a wrong turn after so much time, but the place seemed right to him. The salesman came out of the store, and Marin immediately asked him if he remembered where the St. Rhea shelter was.
The man said that he was the second owner of the store, but had never heard of such a thing.
An old man nearby overheard the conversation and asked Marin if he was looking for the Rhea shelter. The old man himself had never seen it, but he had heard about it long ago, that such a place existed in ancient times. Marin did not understand why he was talking about ancient times, and the old man added that, according to rumors, the shelter had burned to the ground. During the dragon's attack, the village was destroyed, and the shelter burned down completely. Drowning in the water, in his last moments, the boy realized that his life had been unremarkable, boring, colorless, without any real dreams or memories worth holding on to. And in this empty, quiet denouement of everything, he remembered only one thing. It was the warmth of a family dinner. His family had passed away before him, and that was where his first life ended. Suddenly, he saw a bright ceiling and wooden fish above his head. Remembering that he had drowned, two little kids called their sister, saying that the baby in the cradle had finally woken up. Being in the body of a child, the boy did not understand what had happened because he had definitely been in an accident. The nurse asked the baby not to cry, as it would scare the child, who had just opened his eyes. The woman picked up the child, asking him if he had slept well, welcoming the baby to the St. Rhea's orphanage. From today, he was part of the shelter family. This was his first memory in the new world, the warmth of a family home, which he thought the main character would never feel again. Later, Marin brought a donation for the month. The old woman said that he didn't have to bring it all the time, but the knight replied that he just wanted the children to eat something tasty. But more importantly, Marin had only just returned and was already leaving again, and the old woman was afraid that the knight had been pushing himself too hard lately. His sister was worried because Marin was almost always away. The main character said that this time the job was easy, just clearing out some goblins in the south. The woman asked Marin to promise her something before leaving. Surprising the knight, Marin had to return home before dark, as the old woman was going to bake his favorite berry pie. Soon, the main character was taken to the tree where the gravestone of the old woman Rhea's hung. The girl revealed that most of the buildings had been rebuilt after the dragon attack, but no one had survived in the shelter. Now the temple had taken over his duties. No one had been here for a long time, and his younger sister wanted to know who Marin was. Marin fell to his knees and simply remained silent, so the sister decided not to ask any more questions and simply left. The main character reached for the gravestone, reminding Rhea's that she had promised to return soon. Marin wondered what might have happened if he had been there, imagining a scenario of fighting a dragon. Everything could have turned out differently, but the main character would never know and would have to live with that burden. The sisters discussed Marin, who was still sitting in the same place, even after several days. The nun was worried about the protagonist's health, so she left him some food. Marin came to his senses and decided to eat the roll, but as soon as he took a bite, his expression became even worse. Throwing the roll on the ground, the main character called it disgusting. He couldn't even swallow a bite. Everything tasted so bad that he wanted to spit it out. The others ate as if nothing had happened, and the main character thought that something was wrong with him. He had lost his family again and was alone once more. What was the point of living such a miserable existence? Suddenly, Marin smelled something pleasant, which distracted the knight from his suffering. The smell was unfamiliar. It wasn't just meat or fish, nor was it the tasteless junk that made him sick. The main character was so attracted by the smell that his body was drawn uncontrollably to the food. Around the corner were adventurers trying to burn something. If they were caught burning monster carcasses within the castle grounds, they would be fined, so they tried to do it secretly. Surprisingly, the smell of this meat was delicious, but if someone didn't recognize it and accidentally ate it, that person would die without even realizing it was monster meat. The adventurer said that if his ally was afraid, he could go and throw it all outside the castle walls. The meat looked too appetizing, so Marin decided to steal it, doing it so quickly that the adventurers didn't notice it was missing. Returning to Rhea's grave, the main character took a piece of meat, preparing to cut it with his blade. After tasting the monster's meat, Marin felt the blissful taste he had been craving. It was a taste like nothing else. Slightly burnt meat with the smoky flavor, the juice practically bursting onto his tongue. It was a far cry from the food he couldn't even swallow. Ordinary food, and monsters were worlds apart. The taste awakened his instincts as soon as he swallowed a piece of this meat. Feeling so hungry, Marin got so carried away with eating that he didn't even notice he had bitten his hand. The main character began to experience terrible pain from the severe wound, curling up on the rock. His tears were visible through his helmet, and Marin began to regret that he had failed to save the shelter. He apologized for being the only survivor, yet he wanted to continue living. Marin wanted to live like a human being and eat delicious food. He wanted to live happily, despite all the shortcomings. Looking at his wounded arm, the spirit of the orphanage's sister came to the main character and gently touched his wound. The next moment, instead of his hand, there was a leaf. It turned out to be a vision that brought Marin to his senses. Soon, the main character gathered himself, stood up, turned to the tree, and said it was time for him to leave. This time, he would return on time, and from this point on, Marin began his secret life as a gourmet. The main character headed for the tower that stood in the center of Adorama, the Hexalim Adventurers Guild. All adventurers began their journey here. It was a widely recognized organization, specializing in adventures. They did everything here, from exploring dungeons to exterminating monsters. They also kept strict records and managed registered fighters. However, given the status of the establishment, not just anyone could join. The guild had a test dummy that determined whether an adventurer would pass the test based on their strength. Soon, another individual entered the arena, this one wearing a cloak and covering their face. As soon as the elf struck, dust and air rose around her, blinding the adventurers nearby. Her strength set a new record on the training mannequin, with a strike of 5,312 units of power. The elf took first place in today's test, even though there were many strong candidates ahead of her. The adventurer turned to the girl and congratulated her on her first place. He offered to team up with her, as he was well known. While the guy continued his stories, the elf told him not to get carried away, and Marin accidentally bumped her with his shoulder. The knight immediately turned to the girl and quickly apologized, calming the elf's anger in an instant. The man in the rat costume angrily asked Marin why he hadn't taken the strength test yet. The rat called him a complete disappointment, because how was he going to pass the test with that attitude? The elf took Marin by the shoulder, telling him that if he kept stressing out like that, nothing would work out. The main character thanked the girl, and the elf said that, as kin, they should help each other. Guild Administrator Daisy turned around, noticing the visitor she had been waiting for. It was Dahlia. Daisy had heard that the elf had taken first place on today's test, as rumors spread quickly. Daisy handed her a piece of paper, and now she was officially an adventurer of Hexalim. Dahlia couldn't believe she had received a D rank since she had taken first place, but all adventurers in the guild started with a D rank. According to the rules, higher ranks required records of completed orders, but with Lady Dahlia's skills, she would raise her rank in no time. The elf decided to get started right away. She wanted to take on a job that could be completed immediately. There were two suitable tasks: the usual extermination of gorgons on the estate and the collection of damaged eyes. But such orders were only available to groups, as the Gorgon estate had not been cleared by adventurers for a long time. Because of this, monsters had multiplied beyond measure there. There was a threat of a dungeon breach, so only groups were allowed to enter the D rank. The elf turned around, but none of those present inspired confidence, so Dahlia did not know who to be in a group with. Dahlia wanted to ask permission to go alone, but suddenly there was an explosion behind her, breaking the wall. The elf turned back, and as soon as she noticed it, there was a mannequin right in front of her, rushing towards her. Apart from minor scratches and damage to the guild, Dahlia was unharmed, as were all the others. No one could have guessed what had just happened. They only saw the mannequin that had been destroyed. Instead of a stone wall, there was only a hole, and the one who had thrown the stone golem so hard turned out to be the main character. Marin went to Daisy and began to apologize to her repeatedly. Fortunately, no one was hurt, and the knight did not cheat on the test. More importantly, the administrator had been working here for a long time, but had never seen anything like this. If Marin paid for the damage, there would be no problems. This included repairs to the outer wall, broken furniture and equipment, the cost of the golem, and losses from downtime. In total, the main character owed 3 gold and 50 silver coins, and as soon as the amount was paid, the matter would be closed. Ramon wanted to know the deadline, but he was told that he could pay whenever it was convenient for him. The only problem was that if he delayed, the guild would take him to court. But now he was officially an adventurer, so he could pay off his debt by diligently completing orders, although at the moment, only group quests were available. Dahlia approached Marin and suggested they team up, as she was looking for a group for a quest. In times like these, they had to help each other, since they were kindred spirits, so the elf was extremely kind to the knight. At the assessment, Dahlia was at level 36, and the archer had the title of Spirit User. The main character did not understand why the girl was so friendly, and she also had high stats, which made it even more suspicious. Dahlia asked if they could go in this formation, and the administrator confirmed her request, saying that their classes were a perfect match. The warrior and the archer were an excellent combination, opening up group orders for adventurers. This group was created spontaneously, and Marin wasn't sure if this idea would work out. Dahlia held out her hand to introduce herself. The main character was not thrilled about this, but he had a duty to the guild. The knight shook her hand and introduced himself. Marin Glass decided to team up with Dahlia and form a group. The main character wanted to avoid groups if possible, but the archer seemed capable, and they would both be able to fulfill their orders. There was nothing to worry about. For a group formed in a hurry, things weren't so bad. Daisy said that the order had been accepted, and the group registration for the two was complete. But suddenly, the elf broke the handshake, pulling her hand away. Marin didn't understand what had happened, and was extremely surprised. Dahlia's face quickly changed from joy to disgust, and she asked Marin if he was really human. The group set off on their mission, and found themselves at the entrance to the gargoyle dungeon, where Dahlia asked the knight why he was standing right in front of the entrance. Once inside, Dahlia continued to complain that she had ended up in a group with a human, asking why she was being punished by having to hang out with a vulgar amateur. Elves are a race of tall, beautiful, and long-lived beings. People used to worship them, so it's no surprise that they have inflated egos and complicated relationships with humans. Guild Administrator Daisy behaved differently, even though she also came from a noble race. As they advanced deeper into the cave, the surroundings changed, and a castle appeared before the group. This place called itself a mansion. Inside the cave, everything seemed like another world, not like the outside. Marin saw many gargoyles in front of him, and realized that this was their goal this time, so he decided to conduct an assessment. The gremlin monster was at level 18, a low-level gargoyle, and as it grew, its body became stronger and larger. The elf turned to Marin and asked him to stay away and not get in the way. First of all, the knight should not have spoken to her. Marin should have done his job, and the archer would be able to clear this dungeon herself. The main character silently moved forward, surprising the archer. Dahlia told him not to ignore her, but Marin reminded her of her words. Dahlia declared that this did not mean he was allowed to ignore her and be rude. She assumed that it was difficult for people to learn basic manners. The main character asked her to end it already, hoping that they would never meet again. Dahlia asked him where he was going alone. Marin replied that the gremlins were only level 18, and at their level, they were no threat. Dahlia was surprised that Marin had seen her status, and if he had determined it so easily, it meant that he was stronger. The girl called the knight disgusting for peeking at her status, adding that he was a nasty person. Dahlia continued to complain that people were disgusting and rude, and that it was bad manners to peek at someone else's status without permission. Because of the elf's loud cries, the gargoyle noticed the adventurers and decided to attack her. Maron protected Dahlia, asking her to speak more quietly in the dungeon, as it was a matter of etiquette. The main character added that he had indeed checked her status when they were in the guild, which Dahlia had already understood. If the elf didn't like being with Marin, he suggested they finish the task quickly and go their separate ways. Marin asked her not to hold him back. Dahlia was surprised by such insolent words and continued to call him names. The archer said she would take care of the gargoyles, and Marin had to catch a gremlin to complete the quest. Making his way through the dungeon, the main character easily defeated 50 gremlins, saying that should be enough. A new type of monster appeared nearby, gargoyles, level 21 monsters, the highest form of gremlins. The entire body of these enemies was like stone. Dahlia could barely cope with these monsters in close combat, and with each attack, she had to retreat further and further. Marin watched the carnage from behind, assuming that she probably wouldn't die if he left her alone. Placing the cauldron in front of him, the protagonist decided that he needed to find a safe place first. The gremlin's body resembled a frog, so he thought it could be cooked in the same way. Marin cut up only the parts that looked edible, but there was less meat than he thought. But if he made small skewers, the gremlin meat would be quite acceptable as food. Marin decided to roast their hearts as well. The seasoning was supposed to mask their strange smell. For his first attempt at frying gremlin meat, the main character decided that it looked pretty good. After tasting the dish, Marin was delighted. He felt that same blissful taste again. Comparing this meat, it was closer to duck than chicken, slightly salty, with a hint of game. The meat would have been even tastier with sauce. But suddenly Marin's vision began to blur, the poison taking effect. The system detected a weak poison. The hero had been poisoned. Marin suddenly fell and couldn't move. The main character began to crawl, not knowing what to do without an antidote. But suddenly, he remembered the characteristics of gremlins. These monsters use poison when attacking, and if their bodies were poisonous, then they must have an organ that neutralized their own poison. After digging around in the gremlin's body, Marin found a liver that should neutralize the toxins. After trying this liver, the poison was finally neutralized, and Marin was able to breathe a sigh of relief. It wasn't just about the taste. Because of the poison in their bodies, people refused to eat them with their everyday food. While the main character decided to seriously study antidotes, Dahlia appeared behind him, wounded, and with a look of surprise on her face. Dahlia knew that humans were barbarians, but she had no idea how bad it really was. The girl couldn't understand how anyone in their right mind could eat this. Marin knew that elves were vegetarians, but that didn't give him the right to insult those who ate meat. The elf could no longer bear to watch such a nightmare and find herself on the same team as a knight who ate monsters. Dahlia asked the main character if he had already collected the gremlin's eyes. Then why was he still here? The main character said that they had taken the assignment on the condition that they would work as a pair. If the group split up, it would affect not only them, but also the guild administrator. Dahlia had no idea what to say to that, so she just said that it was her problem. Marin noticed that the elf was short of her quota, so he could help with the gargoyles, because Dahlia probably wanted to get away as soon as possible too. The archer said she didn't need help, but the knight interrupted her and said it would be over quickly. Picking up a frying pan and a sword, Marin began to bang them together, revealing that he used to be a shield bearer. He used mockery. The loud noise was used to attract monsters. Dahlia did not understand what he was doing. She could not find any similarity between banging on a pan and being a shield bearer. The archer realized that the most famous skill among them was mockery. It was used to distract monsters and protect the squad. Dozens of gremlins and gargoyles heard the provocation and immediately rushed towards her, while Marin continued to bang on the pot. Dahlia decided to run away. This was usually how allies were protected, but it also worked perfectly for luring flying creatures. However, gargoyles and gremlins became stronger when provoked by the adventurer. The main character didn't care. He gripped his sword and used hand-to-hand combat fencing. A-rank sword mastery automatically activated when using bladed weapons. The level increased proportionally to the rank. B-rank martial arts, an active continuous buff that increases agility for close combat. Dahlia considered it a nightmare that happened because of one person. As long as she kept her distance, she could cover Marin from behind. But in the next moment, Marin rushed forward, slashing through almost all the monsters in his path. Dahlia couldn't believe it. She could barely kill 5 gargoyles on her own, but the knight in front of her had done the impossible. When they decided to return to the guild, Dahlia asked if Marin was really okay with this, because it wasn't necessary to cancel the group's mission. The main character turned around and told the archer that she herself wanted to finish it quickly. Marin only helped because Dahlia wanted to finish early, which made Dahlia think. But suddenly, she asked the main character to stop and be quiet as the archer heard voices. Marin was surprised. He didn't know that elves' ears were so sensitive. Dahlia ran ahead, noticing a cart, a dead deer, and a couple of people on the mountainside. The merchant complained about the adventurer, who couldn't even dodge a deer, and it wasn't even a monster. They had to get to the black market by tomorrow. They had an elf prisoner whom they kicked in the back, ordering the guy to move faster. The elf couldn't stay on his feet and fell to the ground, apologizing and begging people not to hit him. Gritting her teeth, Dahlia asked Marin to look at what she despised about the human race. People talked about abolishing slavery, but behind their backs, they continued to trade in other races. Dahlia asked Marin to get his weapon. They had to make these traders pay, but the knight didn't understand why. The main character asked the girl why she was so sure that this elf was an illegal slave. Maybe he was a criminal or a debtor. The archer heard everything. The traders said they were taking them to the black market, but Marin decided to leave. He didn't want to waste time on something he wouldn't get paid for. Dahlia thought Marin was different, but he turned out to be just as insensitive as everyone else. While the archer remained where she was, the main character stopped and thought about his actions. The merchants had many elves in slavery, even a mother and daughter, who were trembling with fear. Dahlia was also afraid, but she decided she could do it because she had trained for moments like this. Pulling back the bowstring, the archer wanted to end the suffering of her people once and for all. Before Dahlia could shoot, Marin returned and threw his blade forward, frightening the girl. The powerful throw hit the cart, breaking the ground beneath it in an instant and stunning the merchants. Dahlia turned around and noticed the main character, asking what he was doing here if he wasn't going to help in the first place. Marin didn't care about adult affairs, but a child, whether elf or human, was not to blame for anything. The merchants tried to determine where the sword in their cart had come from, and the man pointed to the mountain, saying that the enemies were there. Dahlia called the merchants dirty people, who were always pretending to be something they weren't. She cared because her companions were in that cart. The merchant asked her not to be stupid, because they were official slave traders under the patronage of the House of Beshtal, and all the slaves here were legal goods. The coat of arms of the House of Marquis Beshtal hung on the cart, and the adventurers could apologize to the House of Beshtal and pay for the damage. Otherwise, they would not be able to leave alive. The warrior snorted, saying that elves were stupid, assuming that their hobby was to cause trouble every time they appeared. The main character thought for a moment, saying that the coat of arms on the cart was not that of the legendary House of Beshtal. The merchant asked him to stop talking nonsense. The wolf, symbol of the Marquis Beshtal family, was right in front of them. The wolf had normal eyes, but the ancestor of the Beshtal family had only one eye, and this feature was reflected in the coat of arms. This meant that the coat of arms was a fake. The punishment for someone pretending to be a nobleman was still death. The merchant ordered the adventurers to be killed, as they only had 2 warriors who stood up to the slave traders. In the old days, it was considered good form for mercenaries to avoid fighting each other, but apparently this was already considered ancient history, so Marin decided to neutralize the adventurer with one blow. A single punch sent the adventurer flying straight into a rock, smashing it on impact. The merchant couldn't believe that Marin had defeated such a strong man with a single blow, when suddenly an arrow flew past him. Falling to the ground, the man noticed that Dahlia was standing in front of him with her bowstring drawn, threatening him. The elf family thanked Dahlia for saving them, and the girl replied that she couldn't just walk by when her kin were being taken into slavery. She only did what anyone would have done. Dahlia said that the illegal slave traders they had caught were now in the hands of the guards. It seemed that their relatives were also involved, since they had also pretended to be nobles. The punishment for such a crime would be severe. The elf mother and her child turned to Marin, asking if he was the guard who had saved them. They sincerely thanked the warrior for saving them, after which they decided to leave. Dahlia didn't think she would say this to a human, but she thanked Marin. The girl hated to admit it, but since the man had helped her, and she was able to save her companions, she couldn't help but express her gratitude. The main character asked her to pay him if she was grateful. He demanded money in return for the journey he had made. Initially, Marin did not help her for money, but money was more reliable than any words, which he so desperately needed. Handing the bag of money to the main character, Dahlia left and told the knight to get lost. The next day, the main character returned to the Hexalum Guild, having completed the task for the group. The number of items matched the request exactly, and Daisy congratulated the main character on completing his first task. For a first time, the task was not easy, but Marin handled it perfectly and very quickly. The reward for the task was a couple of silver coins, which the main character considered very meager. Daisy said that, according to the guild's rules, until the knight fully paid off his debt, the amount would be automatically deducted from his reward for the quest. Deciding to pay off the debt as soon as possible, Marin decided to take on another task and set out immediately. Money was the most important thing, but this time, the main character wanted to try something new. The quests available at his rank were the Stowe's dungeon of the 15th level. It was a place covered with stone monsters. Another request for destruction was in the Orc Hut, level 26. Marin had never been to this place before, so he was interested in this particular quest. Inside the guild, The knight met the archer he had met in the wagon, surprised that he had decided to become an adventurer. The girl was glad to see that the main character was healthy and continuing to get better. While Mickey was chatting with Marin, her allies came to her, telling Marin to meet the members of her group. There were 2 other adventurers standing in front of Marin, one of whom introduced herself as Olga, the leader of Mickey's group. Mickey told them about Marin, whom she had met on the way here. Marin was a picky eater, but in reality, a strong mercenary. Olga and Mickey were archers, and the 3rd adventurer in their group was Hecate, the group's mage. Such an unreliable lineup made the main character wonder who was at the forefront of their group. Usually, they hired someone temporarily, but they couldn't find anyone for the last week, so no one went to the dungeon. Magic was easier to learn these days, and there were few melee fighters now. Mickey offered to join their group as the vanguard and go with them to the orc hut. The adventure in the hut turned out to be more dangerous than anyone expected. Mickey barely managed to dodge the orc's destructive swings of his club. Olga came to her aid, shooting an arrow straight into the orc's eye. The monster grabbed its eye and began to scream with a destructive roar. Hecate also used her spell, exploding the arrow lodged in the orc's eye. This attack killed the orc, and the adventurers rejoiced that they had managed to kill all 10 monsters. Since Marin joined the party, the hunt had been going much faster, but suddenly the adventurers fell silent, distracted by an earthquake. A multitude of orcs were heading straight for them, their eyes filled with bloodlust. Mickey did not understand where so many enemies had come from, assuming that they had heard the cries of those they had just killed. The adventurers were terrified, but Marin stood still, not moving an inch. Hecate was not as fast and stumbled while running. The orc managed to catch up with her and was already swinging his weapon to kill the mage. Marin managed to intervene, and the protagonist's lunge cut the orcs to pieces. Hecate was fine, and Olga was surprised that one warrior could destroy an entire horde of orcs so easily. Olga suggested ending the hunt for the day because the others were tired and they had killed enough monsters. More importantly, Marin was frighteningly strong, but at least they were safe thanks to him. Hecate was about to thank the knight for saving them, but he had disappeared from where he had been just a moment ago. Suddenly, the smell of roasted meat wafted through the dungeon, attracting the attention of the adventurers. The adventurers headed there and found Marin, who was cooking food that smelled delicious. Mickey wanted to add mushrooms to his dish, but then she noticed that Marin was roasting orc meat. Olga pointed out that the quest details did not mention anything about roasting orc meat and carrying it with them. The main character focused on his food. At first, he thought the meat would be similar to pork, but when cooked differently, the orc resembled a mixture of beef and pork. With each bite, the juice literally exploded in his mouth, revealing the true taste of the meat, and the fatty, tender meat enveloped the knight's tongue. The adventurers felt disgusted just by the sight of the main character taking a bite of the monster's meat. Marin believed that it couldn't be tasteless, so he decided to enhance the flavor by sprinkling a little salt and pepper on it while frying. The adventurers decided to discuss something, and the main character quickly realized that this group was finished. The hero thought they were kicking him out, but Olga said that she understood his tastes, but asked the knight to refrain from eating monsters so openly. Mickey added that they would not kick out an excellent vanguard because of his unusual tastes. The group exchanged food, and when night fell, the adventurers decided to take a break. In the morning, the battle with the orcs continued, completing the mop-up task faster and faster. In the evening, the adventurers discussed their stories in the cave, while Marin prepared food for monsters. Mickey said that today was the last day of the quest, so why was the knight going to sleep separately? When the main character fell asleep, he had a dream in which the group of adventurers were joking around by the campfire, their laughter filling the forest. Later, he returned to his group, and everyone greeted him joyfully, saying that the campfire was already burning. Suddenly, Olga's scream woke the main character. The group was terrified, and everyone looked at the knight. Marin did not understand why everyone had woken up, adding that it was not yet his turn to be on guard duty. Hecate told him not to move, and right in front of Marin's face was a staff with a spell ready to be cast. If the knight moved, he would lose his head. The main character just had to answer questions. While he was asleep, the adventurers used an appraisal stone on him. Marin was incredibly strong and had never been wounded. Olga wanted to know what his level was, but none of them understood why the main character had a title, calling him a killer of his own kind. Killer of kin is a title given to a cold-blooded creature who has killed more than 100 members of its own race. This title increased attack power by 5% when fighting members of one's own race. Mickey was horrified to learn that Marin had killed more than 100 people. She couldn't turn a blind eye to that. Olga said that since he had become an adventurer, he should not have a criminal record, but that was a completely different matter. The adventurers wanted to know where he got this title from. If it was a mistake, Marin could justify himself. Marin remained silent. Hecate thought that the knight had wanted to kill them from the very beginning, but that wasn't the case. Olga didn't know what had happened to him, but they couldn't just forget about it. It didn't matter that he ate monsters, or that he had a strangely high level. Olga could no longer trust the killer, so the adventurer kicked Marin out of his group. Without a word, the main character got up, grabbed his backpack, and started to leave, leaving the frightened adventurers behind. 100 years ago, in the southern forest of Tyrant, the shield-bearer used mockery to force the goblins into battle. The archer happily said that they had been caught, shooting a dozen arrows at the monsters. The female swordsman praised her group, asking if all its members were safe. The swordswoman praised the archer for killing 2 goblins at once, but she considered it trivial. The man said there were still 18 left, so it was not worth relaxing. The swordswoman wanted to know if the main character had finished with the reward documents. Charlotte said yes, and that they could move on. On their way, the adventurers discussed the bold girl from the guild, who was kind to the other members. The warriors also noticed that there were fewer goblins than stated in the quest. Charlotte suggested that this was because they were on the edge of the forest, and there might be a settlement in the center. But Charlotte's words did not reach her allies, and upon noticing this, a dark aura began to emanate from them. Charlotte grabbed her ally's shoulder, but as soon as they turned back, their eyes changed color, and wounds appeared on their bodies. Many eyes appeared around them, and the knight was asked why he had done this to them, and why he was the only one who had survived. The main character got out of bed. It was all a nightmare. He was in bed. When Marin joined the guild, there were already many rumors about him. He was a murderer who joined groups as a newcomer, threatened them, and extorted money from them. While the knight was asleep, the rumors had spread. Such people always made mountains out of molehills. The main character decided not to get involved with them, and went to Daisy. She told him she had news. Marin Glass had been promoted to a C-rank adventurer as of today, and new quests were available to him. The exam for promotion to C-rank had been cancelled several years ago, and now, if achievements were accumulated within a certain period of time, promotion to C-rank would occur automatically. A lot had changed during Marin's absence. Accepting his promotion, the knight wanted to move on to the new rank's orders right away. Daisy agreed, showing him a couple of sheets with the remaining C-rank orders. Marin was interested in a level 30 harpy nest. The request was to obtain harpy feathers. The main character thought about the nature of these creatures, which resemble birds in shape, assuming that they tasted similar to chicken. Dahlia was in the guild, and after greeting Marona, she asked the killer of her kin if he was enjoying his peaceful life. The archer had already heard that he had killed more than 100 people and had become a celebrity among adventurers, but the main character ignored him. Another adventurer appeared. Dahlia was already familiar with her, but Maron did not know her. Dahlia asked permission to introduce this adventurer, who was the leader of her new group. The girl's name was Imotar Kitrit Kiroki, and she had already heard about Marin from Dahlia. Marin looked at the beast woman. Judging by her equipment, she was a martial arts master, but something about her was wrong. After assessing the girl, it turned out that Imotar was level 59, a beast human race, and a priest class. But Marin was surprised that, in addition to Imitar's high strength, her class was surprising, as it did not suit the girl's appearance at all. Priests are a support class, their main role being healing. But Imitar had nothing in common with a priest. She looked as far from holy as possible. Dahlia was looking for a group of other races, far away from nasty people, and came across Imitar's announcement about recruiting for a group of misanthropes, so she decided to join. At the moment, the group consists only of Imitar and Dahlia. The beast woman heard rumors in the guild and suggested the idea. Since Marona had the title of killer of his own kind, even though he was human, he was a good fit for this group. In addition to the rumors of murders, the knight was very strong. Imotar suggested that he join the group, as she was impressed by how many people Marona had wiped off the face of the earth, so they would make an exception for him. The main character did not want to agree to such a proposal, but if he refused, there were no other options. That was true. Now that everyone knew about the killer of his own kind, it would be impossible to find a group. Marin had to agree, so Imitar suggested they go ahead and test their skills and compatibility. As soon as they entered the Harpy's dungeon, Marin was faced with a couple of monsters, and flying monsters are a real pain for a shield bearer. While Marin was thinking about how to get to the Harpies, the archer easily shot the monster. Dahlia asked them to leave the small stuff to her, and suggested that Marin do what he does best, dance for them. Another harpy rushed to attack. The main character turned around. Imitar was already running towards him, and signaled him to raise his shield. When Marin raised his shield, the beastman stepped on it, using it as a step. Then Imitar jumped high into the air, heading straight for the harpy to attack. The red-haired beastman quickly found herself right in front of the harpy, and easily defeated it with her iron knuckles. Imotar said that the man had excellent reflexes, and that they worked well together. Although Marin didn't want to do it at first, fighting as a team wasn't so bad. The group had not been in the dungeon for long, but they had already managed to kill 3 harpies, and after finishing off the rest, they would be able to take a break. Marin looked at the corpses, and noticed a small cat-like creature among them. Dahlia called Marin a country bumpkin, because he had never heard of living dolls before, which were now in fashion. It was a pet charged with mana. Forco was a limited edition model that cost 2 gold coins. Dahlia reached for the pet, while Forco had already managed to clean the feathers from the harpies' bodies. Since they worked for the mains, they didn't need to be fed, and they wouldn't die. And if they were well trained, the dolls helped in battle and with cleaning. The pet was still small, and Imitar added that Dahlia loved cute things. Dahlia told Marin not to try to eat the doll, as it was a golem and had no meat in it. Thanks to the doll, the group had already managed to collect half of the feathers needed to complete the order. Imitar said that Marin had excellent skills, asking the archer why she hadn't mentioned him for so long, but there were circumstances. Suddenly, the beast woman smelled something unusual. She continued to sniff, and guessed that it was chicken. Dahlia immediately realized that Marin was cooking monsters, and asked Imitar not to go there. After cutting open the harpy, the main character heated up the pan, and was about to start frying the meat. After a short time, Marin finished cooking the harpies in the pan. The texture was similar to chicken, but the taste was richer. There was no unpleasant smell. The sweetness melted in the mouth, and even the fat was noticeable. Dahlia came over, attracted by the smell, and noticed Marin, who was smiling and enjoying the cooked food. The archer couldn't believe her eyes, and the knight offered to share if the girls were hungry. Imitar clutched her head. She thought nothing could surprise her anymore, but she was extremely wrong. Anatomically, the harpy's face was far from human, but that wasn't what bothered the girls. While Dahlia continued to marvel, Imitar stared at the wings, which enticed her with their smell, but she considered it disgusting, refusing to believe that for a second it had seemed appetizing to her. While Marin continued to feast on the chicken, Imitar stared at the juicy piece of meat again. The beast woman clutched her head, unable to believe that food made from a monster could tempt her so. The main character paid no attention to this, remembering the cauldron behind him, in which he was stewing another portion of meat. After overcooking the food a little, it didn't spoil, and Marin also made a stewed harpy leg. Imitar was surprised that the knight also ate the legs, since there was practically no meat on them. But Marin had always wanted to try chicken feet without spices. Since the meat was stewed over low heat, it was soft like pudding and sweet. Thanks to the collagen, it didn't fall apart. It would be even better if you added a spicy sauce to the legs. Marin decided to save one more and take it home to try it with sauce. Dahlia turned to Marin and said that because of him, she couldn't even relax. Suddenly, the archer noticed that the knight was eating a leg and warned him that harpies had paralyzing poison in their bones, but it was too late. Dahlia asked Imitar to use healing magic, but she did not know how to heal allies, even though it was basic for a priest. The beast woman thought that learning these spells was too tedious. Loud noises attracted the harpy, and the girls were frightened, but they had no choice but to fight. Imitar told Dahlia to get out of the way. She had learned a new spell that she wanted to use on the harpy. The girl used her magic to create a raging flame, a flema infernos, which completely covered the cave. In the burst of flame, Dahlia's toy burned up. She had had it for less than a week. Dahlia was angry at Imitar, who apologized, saying that her magic was still at the F rank, so she had missed. While Marin lay on the ground, the girls argued about the burned forco, which was from a limited collection. The quest items from the harpies completely met the requested quota, but the group would have to dispose of the harpy meat remains themselves. Dahlia could barely stand on her feet. She was very tired after the quest. Imitar wanted to clarify whether she really didn't want her to compensate her for the damage to Forco. Imitar noticed a bag with the remains of the harpies, and the girl asked him why. Marin replied that he felt sorry to throw away the meat after cutting it up. Imitar was surprised that Marin was going to carry the remains in plain sight, so she suggested putting them away in the inventory. Marin opened his storage, which had a limit of 30 slots and 100 gold coins. He had completely forgotten about it. All this time, the main character had been carrying heavy loads on his own, which is why everyone around him looked at him like he was an idiot. The knight couldn't believe how long he had been acting so foolishly, forgetting such a basic thing. The beastman asked Marin how he was doing, adding that it had been tough at the end, but that they had good skills and worked well together. In that case, if the main character didn't mind, Imitar suggested that he officially join their group, because together they could handle any task with ease. Dahlia and Imitar were very strong, and in Marin's opinion, it was better to have companions than to be alone. The main character agreed to join the group, and Imitar immediately went to register him. Dahlia eagerly awaited the moment they would spend together, until his pitiful human life came to an end. Suddenly, the main character remembered his previous group, who had also told him that they were happy to work with him. Soon, Imitar returned, apologizing for making her teammates wait, but she finally got the documents. The group was called Total Chaos, and Imitar and Dahlia were not very happy with this name. Imitar did indeed register the group under that name, saying that they should not object to the leader's decision. The beast woman heard the man mutter this in his happy nest, and there really was chaos there. Imitar didn't understand why, but the word stuck in her mind, even though she couldn't fully grasp its meaning, but it caught her attention. Dahlia said that the name should be chosen together, but they had no other ideas, so the group was named that way. Dahlia couldn't believe that all her future achievements would be under the name of Chaos. Although the name was strange, it wasn't going to kill anyone. Marin was going to go to his room and reheat the leftover harpy meat. Imitar stopped the main character, saying that because of the new addition to the group, they needed a welcome party. The main character wanted to refuse at first, but they ended up at a restaurant where Imitar said they could drink and eat as much as they wanted, as she was treating them today. Dahlia was still surprised by the name Chaos, but the application had already been submitted, so she would have to accept it. The food on the table looked appetizing, but Marin didn't really want to touch it. As soon as he tasted the food, he felt nauseous. And at that moment, the girls continued to argue about the name. Suddenly, Imitar revealed the purpose of creating the group. The beast woman wanted to get rank A as quickly as possible. All adventurers in Hexalim started at rank D and rose through the ranks by passing promotion exams. But the ceiling for a regular adventurer taking standard exams was rank B. To obtain rank A, an adventurer's skills and achievements must be recognized as outstanding. The content of the exam was a closely guarded secret, and almost no one knew what it would entail. Only the true elite, approved by the guild, could achieve this. Imotaru revealed that her younger brothers are still enslaved by humans, so she needs a lot of money to buy their freedom.
That man said that if the Beastman works for 3 years and saves up enough money, he will sell them their freedom. He promised not to touch them for those 3 years.
Her family was enslaved after the revolution, so Imitar and her brothers were not saved. To become free, one must buy oneself out from the master. There is no other way.
The main character did not know about some revolution, but Dahlia said that it was recent, by human standards.
The archer decided to explain briefly. As the knight knew, people had been kidnapping other races and selling them into slavery for centuries. Elves were prized for their rarity and beauty, dwarves for their skill and endurance, and beastmen were considered animals and also enslaved. The Imitar family had suffered the same fate. Humans locked up their captives so they couldn't escape and used them as they pleased. No one could escape, and those who tried met a terrible end. Human cruelty lasted for centuries. Finally, the cup of patience overflowed, and many races united in an alliance. Those who had lived apart stood shoulder to shoulder against humans. Thus began the revolution. Humans called it a race war. They made demands of humans. One of them was the abolition of slavery. The beast people threatened full-scale war if their demands were not met. At first, humans resisted, but unlike the beast people, who had nothing to lose, humans risked too much. In the end, they accepted the terms and signed a pact. This pact prohibited trade with other races and forced humans to respect the borders of foreign lands. After that, those who had been hiding began to come out into the open, and now many races live openly again. Dahlia and Imitar can work as adventurers only because of this pact, and they have some freedom in the cities. As soon as Imitar was freed, she immediately joined the adventurers. It's the fastest way to earn a lot of money. The archer revealed her goal. As soon as she reached rank A, she wanted to become the elder of the forest where she grew up. Her family had always taken on this role, and now it was the turn of the new generation. But the problem was that this burden fell only on the eldest child. Dahlia's sister wanted to be the elder, but everyone insisted on tradition and tried to force her to do it. When it came to protecting the forest, Dahlia believed she could do it better than anyone else. The elves agreed to accept her if she returned within 150 years with great achievements. Given the opportunity to take the place of the elder, Dahlia understood that simply becoming an A-rank adventurer would not be enough. From slaves to future elders, everyone had their own desperate reasons, but they had something to strive for. Marin began to think about his reason, but the grave of his sister Rias immediately popped into his head. Clenching his fists, the main character revealed his reason for becoming an adventurer. He wanted to kill the dragon. The very dragon that attacked Adorama and burned the village to the ground long ago. Marin wanted to kill that beast. Dahlia thought he had no desires, but for a man, he had more ambition than anyone else. In any case, Marin's goal was also to raise his rank, because a high rank was necessary to participate in punitive operations against dragons and to access information. Since they had similar goals, from that moment on, the group would work together, advancing along the path of adventurers. Yesterday, the squad was officially formed, so the next day Marin decided to rest and eat well. Although he didn't buy anything, he was already broke. After paying for the hotel, he had almost no money left. Having spent a lot of money on food, Marin decided to use it for cooking, first heating up the oil. When the oil was hot, the main character used the storage room to get the meat he had saved. Even after lying in storage for a long time, his meat was still fresh, proving that it was the perfect place to store provisions. Adding an egg for the batter, Marin began to evenly coat the meat in the batter mixed with breadcrumbs. And when he put them in the oil, as expected, the sound was music to Marin's ears, no matter how many times he heard it. When it was nicely browned, he turned it over a couple of times so it wouldn't burn, and fried it twice. Finally, he drained the oil and placed it on a plate. The result was fried harpy thigh. For his first attempt, Marin thought it was perfectly cooked. The crispy crust and tender, juicy harpy meat were the best combination, and the sweet meat juice, trapped under the batter, splashed with every bite, and the subtle sweetness unique to harpies. It was like eating a crab made entirely of meat. While Marin was enjoying his cooking, someone started banging on the door. From the voice, it was Dahlia. The archer continued to bang on the door, asking the knight why he was sleeping in the middle of the day. The main character opened the door and asked Dahlia what she wanted. The archer immediately asked Marin why he was wearing a helmet, even in his room. But that didn't matter, because Dahlia urgently needed to discuss something and asked if the main character had a minute. The girl had to go inside, because Imitar had problems that were not for prying ears. But as soon as Dahlia was inside, she immediately noticed that Marin was cooking monster meat again. First, Dahlia wanted to tell him a secret about Imitar, but she asked Marin for a small amount of money first. Marin stood up and said that if Dahlia wanted to ask him for money, he wouldn't even listen to her. The main character said that if the reason was not convincing, she would be kicked out of there immediately. The archer asked why people were so impatient. Dahlia decided to get to the point, revealing that Imitar had deceived her human master. Marin must have heard that Imitar had been saving money for her younger siblings, and that they had not taken on any work today, precisely because the Beastman had gone to visit her brothers. As it turned out, the master had broken his word and was going to put her brothers up for auction. Dahlia suggested that the master had probably planned this from the very beginning. He was only pretending to let them go in order to mock Imitar. And when Imitar begged him to stop, he said he would cancel the auction if she brought the ransom 5 days before it began. Marin wanted to know how much money she needed to raise. Dahlia revealed that she needed 20 gold coins for her 2 brothers. If you convert the local currency to the currency of his past life, 1 bron is about 10 yen. 100 brons equaled 1 silver coin, and 100 silver coins equaled 1 gold coin. An ordinary adventurer needed about 2 gold coins to live on for a month. Dahlia didn't want to talk about it on every street corner, but Imitar begged her to at least save her brothers. Besides, the archer couldn't turn a blind eye to slavery. After signing the treaty, all minor races were brothers. If Marin lent her a little, the elf swore by her name that she would pay it all back, but the main character refused. He had only known his allies for a few days, so he couldn't trust her with such a large sum of money. Dahlia realized that she would not get the money, regretting that the Imitar brothers were just babies who had only just learned to walk. The main character immediately understood that Dahlia was trying to play on his pity, knowing his character. The archer said that she would return twice as much money to Marin with interest, but Marin replied that the girl could run away or not repay the debt until his death. Dahlia thought about what to say, then realized that there was no other way out, and asked the knight to bend down. The archer began to whisper, and asked Marin if he happened to have the attribute of wind among his innate abilities. In this world, if an adventurer's intelligence is high enough, they can use any kind of magic. However, the innate attribute indicated which element suited him best. Marin's attribute magic consumed less energy, but was much more powerful. Attributes are given at birth, and usually a person has only one. Occasionally, geniuses with 2 or more attributes were born, and most of the great magicians in history were just that. If Marin helps Dahlia, she will grant him the blessing of the spirit, the attribute of wind. But the knight was not so interested, asking if giving out attributes was that easy. Receiving a positive answer, the main character stood up and told Dahlia that he would help her. Dahlia wanted to know where Marin was going to get the money. She had asked for it herself, but 20 gold coins was a considerable sum. Marin wanted to know if trophies obtained by poaching in high-level dungeons could only be sold on the black market. Dahlia said that it was forbidden to enter dungeons that were not of one's rank without the guild's permission. Marin knew this, but there was no other way to quickly raise such a sum. But Dahlia insisted that breaking the law was too dangerous, no matter what. The guild issues quests corresponding to the adventurer's rank. It is strictly forbidden for brothers to undertake missions that are not of their level. If caught in a dungeon without the appropriate rank, they would face severe punishment, a fine, and a temporary ban on quests. And even if they broke the law, it would take too much time. Unlike low-level dungeons, complex dungeons are usually far from the city. Just the round trip would take 3 days. Dahlia had her own plan for earning money by asking for help from families in Hyanum, but she already had debts there, so she would have to add a little from the money she earned on quests. Marin had no savings, so the archer wanted to know if he had any items to sell. The main character opened his storage and began to examine its contents, thinking about the most valuable item. The first thing in his storage was a pair of unusual earrings, which were the most valuable items he owned. Dahlia suggested that they gather everything they could, and then they would meet later and share the money. The main character put on his robe, then went to a small shop to sell unnecessary items. Marin wanted to sell something, and the buyer said he would take everything from monster bones to organs. Seeing the earrings in the main character's hands, the buyer thought for a moment, saying that it would be better to take them to a jewelry store, but then suddenly stopped. These earrings were very rare and were called fragments of the Pleiades. They could no longer be found anywhere since the dungeon had disappeared. The man wanted to know where the adventurer had gotten such a rarity. Marin replied that a friend had given him the earrings. Imitar knelt before the slave trader, and he said that it was pointless to resist. It seemed that his animal mind had finally understood. The 3 years the trader had given Imitar were just a whim, but she would never be able to walk free again. Imitar wanted to kill him on the spot, smash the slave trader's ugly face, but she couldn't. Suddenly, Dahlia and Marin entered the room, and Imitar immediately heard that voice and noticed her allies. The beast woman did not understand why Dahlia had brought the main character, but she revealed that the knight had helped raise the money. Marin said that they were worthy teammates and had prepared the amount the master had requested, so the knight wanted to make a deal. Although they were in the same group, Imitar did not want to accept help from a human, hoping that he would not reproach her. The owner couldn't believe that a C-rank adventurer had such a sum, saying that he knew how to spot fakes. Opening the bag, the man was horrified to find real gold inside. The adventurers had indeed collected 20 gold coins in such a short time. The owner confirmed that they had brought the money, but the contract stated that Imitar had to earn it herself. Money from third parties violated the terms of the deal. Dahlia said that this was outrageous, because according to the contract, if a slave's family could not pay the ransom, they were subject to sale. But after her words, the owner still approved the sale of the slaves. Imitar did not know what she would have done if it weren't for Dahlia. A short time later, Imitar's younger siblings were reunited with her, and the family was reunited. Marin clenched his fist. Dahlia was right. The slave traders dared to enslave such children and starve them. The master received the slaves' documents and destroyed them, and now the children had complete freedom. Imitar used her magic and burned them to ashes, unleashing her anger on the slavery documents. The master said that her younger children were now completely free, but Imitar was still his slave, and her friends apparently had no more money. Using his storage space again, Marin took out another bag of gold and said that he was buying Imitar's freedom. The beast woman said she didn't need Marin's help, The main thing was that the younger ones were saved, and she could manage on her own from now on. The master's expression changed, and he said sarcastically that, unfortunately, Imatar had already been put up for auction today, so the deal was off. Imatar became angry, stating that there had never been any talk of putting her up for auction. Dahlia told the man not to talk nonsense. She would not fall for such a cheap excuse. The slave trader declared that everything was completely legal. The owner could buy and sell slaves as he pleased. The contract even stated that the legal trade of slaves was the owner's legal right. Dahlia could not contain her anger, calling the man all sorts of names for using such a dirty trick. Maran considered this childishness, a ridiculous excuse that the owner had come up with on the spot, because he did not want to sell Imatar. As long as the laws existed, he could not refuse to sell. The main character agreed to participate in the auction, asking Imatar to simply wait for him and not do anything foolish. Once, the nun Rias told Charlotte that all children need someone to look after them. The young and immature need adults to guide them on the right path and protect them. This applied to absolutely everyone. Every child born into this world deserved protection. Marin understood that Imatar was the only one who could protect these children, save her younger siblings. But that wasn't all. The Beastman shouldn't have left the children alone. Imatar believed the main character's words, telling him that if he failed after making such grand promises, she would not forgive him. Dahlia was not thrilled, but Marin had a plan, so she agreed to play along, telling the girl that they would see each other at the auction. The owner laughed, saying that Imatar really did have reliable friends, but he didn't believe they would be able to free her. The slave trader approached Imatar and said that no matter how much she struggled, she would not escape. The owner told his servant to contact the trade guild's support team and get ready. One of the lots was a slave criminal arrested for participating in numerous violent crimes. The man had no physical disabilities and was completely healthy. Dahlia asked the staff about the average prices for beastman slaves. They go for 8 gold pieces. Even if the price exceeds 10, she should have enough money if she adds some more. The next lot was Imatar, a wolf beastman from the border, a slave gladiator who set a record as a hero in the Colosseum. Physically, she was much stronger than a human, as expected of a beastman, and Imatar was a young woman. The owner was sure that the adventurers had little money left, so they would not be able to buy Imatar. The seller announced that bidding for this lot would start at 6 gold coins and 30 silver coins. Participant 57 raised his hand, and the seller confidently asked the man to name his price. The very first bid was 20 gold coins, and the whole room was filled with sounds of surprise at such a high bid. Dahlia was frightened. She had clearly heard 8 gold coins, but 10 gold coins on top of that was insane money. Marin Glass raised his hand. He was participant number 21. The guy immediately asked for the maximum bid. The seller revealed that the maximum allowable price was 30 gold pieces for humans and 50 gold pieces for other races. Realizing that 50 was the maximum, Marin immediately offered 50 for Imatar's ransom. Dahlia was surprised, because she thought Marin only had a dozen gold coins. But as it turned out, he simply offered 10, without saying that it was all he had. The owner's jaw dropped. Marin did not reveal the amount of money he had, because he did not trust the slave trader at first. Judging by the main character's appearance, the seller assumed that he would not be able to pay such an amount and would ask for an installment plan. The man said that the auction house's rule was that bids were only accepted for amounts that could be paid immediately. Marin understood, then got up from his seat and immediately went to Imatar. But the seller was surprised and said that they could not let him in. The main character raised his hand and opened the vault, from which gold coins began to pour out. The slave trader couldn't believe that some pathetic adventurer was actually laying out 50 gold pieces. Imatar couldn't stand up. She still couldn't comprehend the amount of money lying right in front of her. When the lot was sold, Imatar was finally able to embrace her family, realizing that they were all free. Dahlia asked the knight why he hadn't said right away that he had that kind of money. The main character pointed out that she hadn't asked how much he had with him. Imatar stood up, embarrassment on her face, and turned to the main character to thank him for saving them. Imatar's younger brother and sister rushed to the knight because he smelled of delicious meat. The beastman couldn't figure out how to thank Marin. Dahlia asked her not to worry about it, as he probably just liked them as friends. Imotat said that Marin smelled so oily and appetizing, asking if he had anything for lunch. But Dahlia did not immediately understand what she was talking about. The elf immediately burst into his room and stopped Marin from feeding the younger ones monster meat. The children had already tasted the harpy meat, and the joy did not leave their faces. They said it was the most delicious dish they had ever eaten. The main character said that the children already had all their teeth, and that beastmen had very strong stomachs. Imatar added that they were also growing rapidly, so if it wasn't iron or monster meat, they could digest anything. But suddenly, the beastman realized something and asked what kind of meat it was. The main character revealed that it was harpy meat, and Motar immediately took the meat away from the children, even though the younger brother insisted that the dish was very tasty. The children continued to persuade their sister to give them the meat, and this made even Imataru think twice. If she ate it and collapsed, the children would be frightened and would never touch food again. So Imatar continued to think about what to do. She thought it would be better to die than to eat the dirty, disgusting monster, but for the sake of her family, she would do it. Imotaro didn't care about the taste. She just wanted to collapse on the floor and convulse as if she had been poisoned. But when the girl tasted the meat, she did not fall. and Dahlia was frightened, thinking that there was poison in the meat. Imitar, however, was flattered by the tender and exquisite taste of the harpy's meat. For the first time in her life, Imitar tasted such tender, juicy, and aromatic meat that she couldn't believe it was really made from a monster. Imitar took her brother and sister and began to run away, saying that she would not forget this humiliation from Marin. The main character told Dahlia that until she paid back her debt, the elf would give him 90% of the proceeds from her orders. Dahlia thought that the knight wanted to starve her to death, but Marin replied that if she died from it, then that was where she belonged. And since they had already dealt with the slave trader, it was time for Dahlia to pay another part of the reward. In the middle of the night, the elf and Marin went into the forest. The girl said that the village was too crowded, which was a hindrance, because spirits did not like such an environment. Not everyone is capable of transferring spirits, but first Marin had to take off his gloves so that the blessing could be absorbed. Skin contact was necessary. Elves conceived in the forest are born with the blessing of a spirit, and the element of that spirit becomes their innate gift. The bound spirit accompanies the elf throughout their life, like a guardian angel. If asked, it can bestow the blessing of the spirit on another. But even with their own spirit, this can only be done once in a lifetime. Usually, the gift is passed on to a spouse, child, or savior. Marin did not know that it was so valuable, and was not sure whether it was worth spending the gift on him. Dahlia said that, in essence, he was her savior, because the knight had twice fulfilled her cherished dream. He had saved her companions, who were being tortured by people. Dahlia summoned the spirit sylph, and the night was enveloped in a green wind that grew stronger with every passing second. In the past, people stole elves not only for their beauty, they tried to take away this blessing by torturing beastmen to lure it out. Most of her companions endured humiliation and pain, maintaining their pride to the end. But after the treaty, when the slaves were freed, the mortality rate among the elves skyrocketed. The reason was suicide. Elves have too good a memory. It is their curse. Those who survived after the treaty could not bear the nightmarish memories and decided to end their own lives. Dahlia hated the people who just watched this sea of suffering and did nothing. If it were up to her, she would have killed them all. Suddenly, there was a resonance of spirits. Sylph. Marin gained an affinity for the element of wind, and his current attributes became fire and wind. Dahlia asked him not to be deluded. She still hated people, calling them vile and greedy, for they were ready to do anything for profit. Her blessing did not mean that she had forgiven the main character for his human nature. The next day, the main character came to the Hexalim Guild, where his comrades were already waiting for him. Imitar said that she had to work hard, because they were looking for someone from the Beastmen, since these children could not be trusted with humans. But in the end, they found a nanny. Today was a historic day, as Imitar became a free citizen and found an excellent order for a crystal cave with a request to destroy the mud dort. Dahlia felt disgusted, because hunting in a dirty swamp was not much fun, but this task was safe for rank C. A mud dart is a piece of mud that crawls like a slug, but it is still a monster, so Morona was interested in its taste. The archer understood the main character's intentions, and couldn't believe that he was going to taste the mud, but Amoret said it was time to move on to the wagon. Dahlia wanted to know what other monsters lived in the crystal cave, and the beast woman said she would tell her all the details in the wagon. After the quest, they needed to find accommodation for Imarat and the younger ones, because they couldn't live in a hotel forever. A wagon stopped in front of the group, but it was clearly not the one they were expecting, as it was too luxurious. A man got out of the carriage, knowing right away that the group would be here, and luckily, he made it in time. The man in the carriage turned out to be Imarat's former owner, who got out of the carriage with a smirk. The main character reminded the slave trader that the deal had long been closed, and asked what he wanted.
The man said that when he sold Imarat, he realized how much he missed her. As they say, we don't appreciate what we have until we lose it.
The owner had a proposal. He asked Marin if he would agree to cancel the deal and return the slave girl, stunning Marin with such a brazen offer. Dahlia thought it was nonsense, because everything was over, and the master was trying to pull off some kind of dirty trick. Imarat was furious. The master asked the elf to be quiet, and told the beastman not to look at him so viciously. The guards around them were above level 80, so even if Imarat got angry and lashed out, the master would not be able to hold back the guards. The owner immediately offered 100 gold pieces for Marin to sell him back the slave, but he was promptly refused. The slave trader did not think that Imarat was worth more, and Dahlia immediately told him to watch his language. The owner resorted to extreme measures and offered 150 gold pieces, but was again quickly refused. Imarat declared that even if he offered 100 million, Marin would never sell her. The owner could no longer restrain himself. He went beyond all market prices and offered 200 gold coins for the beast man. Such a large sum was tempting, but Marin refused again, saying that he was joking. The documents were destroyed on the spot, so Imarat was no longer a slave, and that was a fact. This meant that there would be no further deals with him. If in the future the owner dared to offend Imitar as her comrade, Marin would personally deal with him. The slave trader tried to settle everything peacefully and with money, but since he had no choice, he couldn't resist the pleasure of playing with Imarat. As soon as he said he would take her by force, the beast man rushed forward and struck her former master. She had been silent and listening, but now the girl was furious and would no longer tolerate it. Imorat was no longer his slave, so the man did not dare to talk down to her. The guard wanted to rush into battle to defend his master, but suddenly Marin's hand appeared behind him. The man did not understand how the main character had concealed his presence. The next moment, the main character easily pinned the very strong 80th level guard face down on the ground. The second guard rushed to the defense, calling the group insolent brats, and thrust his spear forward. Marin picked up the nearest stone and threw it forward, without distracting himself with the second guard. As soon as the stone hit him, the guard immediately fell to the ground. The slave trader got up and couldn't believe that his guards had been defeated so easily. He wondered about Marin's level. Getting up, the knight revealed that his strength was at 95. Finally, when the former master had no more defenses left, Imotar was able to beat him up. After a while, Dahlia asked the girl to stop, as they would be late for the carriage. Imotar had just finished venting her anger on her former master, whose face was now barely recognizable. Now the beastman's face was beaming with joy. She felt much better after beating up the man who had tormented her for so long. The man did not understand how some adventurers dared to do this to him, and he was going to report them to the guild. Marin appeared before him and said that he had been looking for a team lately because there were rumors that he was a murderer. Finding a new group is much more difficult than destroying a trade guild. The main character ordered the owner not to interfere with the team he had found with such difficulty. With just one kick, Marin punched a hole in the slave trader's cart, smashing it to pieces. The main character began to leave, saying that it was a warning so that the owner would know his place. Immediately after that, the group found themselves in a dungeon, where Dahlia revealed that the mud monsters were afraid of fire. Imotar took this as a command and immediately summoned her signature fire whirlwind. The archer asked the beast woman if she had trained at all to better use this skill. Imotar replied that while she was in captivity, she had no time to improve her skills. Marin decided to start tasting right away. Imotar warned him that she had not yet learned healing, so if he fell again, she would not be able to save him. The lump of mud had no smell, so its taste might also be different from that of soil, but its texture was like chewed papier-mâché with a bubblegum flavor. Just because it was a monster didn't mean it was tasty. Realizing that the mud monster was not to his taste, Moreau decided to finish the remains of the roasted harpy. Imotar turned to the main character, saying that she had been busy with the younger ones at the time and hadn't thanked him properly, but she was extremely grateful for saving her family. From that moment on, Imotar was going to save money to repay her debt. Moreau convinced her that she needed to feed her younger siblings, so there was no need to repay the debt. Dahlia wanted to know where the main character got such a large sum of money, assuming that he had gotten involved in something dangerous, like the poaching they had talked about. But it turned out to be much simpler. The main character had sold a memento belonging to a former friend. He had kept it for personal reasons, but decided it was time to let it go and got rid of it. Imotar couldn't understand why he sold something so valuable. Even if she paid back the debt, he might never get it back. The main character didn't think it was a big deal, since Dahlia and Imotar were now his friends. Imotar was delighted and announced that from today, she would once again try to be the leader of the group. The girl had heard that Dahlia had given Marin her blessing, and it turned out that she had known him a little longer than she had known the beastmen. Imotar also wanted to know why Maran always wore a bucket on his head, because she had never seen his face. The main character said that he had personal reasons for doing so, and when he noticed the beast woman approaching, he asked her what she was doing. Imotar turned away and suggested that Marin had a huge scar there, but Dahlia asked her not to pry into things that others did not want to reveal. But even Dahlia agreed that Marin was too secretive about his identity. If someone was interested in him, it meant they wanted to be friends. Suddenly, next to them, the rock with the crystals broke, and a pile of crystals flew forward. Right inside the rock was a crystal-tailed monster, resembling an iguana. Imotar reacted quickly and jumped on the monster, deftly killing it with one blow. The main character did not have time to dodge the crystals flying at him, and one of them hit the knight right in the eye. Marin checked and saw that the eye was not damaged, so he did not pay attention to the injury. Imotar told the main character to take off his helmet so they could examine the wound and treat it. If the eye was damaged, they would immediately return to the temple, but Marin did not want to take off his helmet. He remembered the time when people saw him without his helmet and called him a monster in horror. With a cry, the main character told his allies not to touch him, causing the girls to freeze in shock. Marin was so unwilling to let anyone see his face that he continued to shout for everyone to stay away. Dahlia understood that he was uncomfortable, but the wound needed to be examined in order to heal it. Marin calmed down and asked them to continue cleaning the wound. His allies knew his level, so the crystal tail would not inflict a fatal wound on him. The girls decided to take Marin's word for it, but if he got worse, it would be best for the knight to report his condition. Imotar apologized for trying to remove his helmet, and Marin apologized for yelling. Returning to the guild, Imotar handed over the necessary ingredients to complete the mission, but the group looked agitated. Dahlia suggested that the group take a break today and keep an eye on Marin's condition while they rested. The group agreed to rest, when suddenly an adventurer stumbled into the guild and said that an emergency had occurred. According to the girl, a new dungeon had been confirmed in the forest area on the border between Adorama and the capital. The dungeon was open. The dungeon was called the Dryad Garden. Imotar said that there were a bunch of other groups there. The guild would figure it out, and they would hurry to the hotel. The main character said that they would also participate in the cleanup, even though he needed rest. but there was something more important. The groups of adventurers gathered at the site. The guy in shining armor asked all the groups summoned by the guild to gather in front of him. Rumors spread that the first explorer of this dungeon had been killed by the boss, and now he was in the temple. According to the rumors, there were 2 bosses in the dungeon, and strangest of all, both were dryads. Dryads are plant monsters, and thinking about them, Marin suggested that they would make a good salad. Amotar said that if Marin started eating dryads in front of everyone, their group's reputation would be ruined. Marin added that elves are vegetarians, and although he had never cooked for Dahlia before, this time he was going to make her a dish. There were indeed 2 bosses in the dungeon, but a flamboyant adventurer named Anchorman Derisirik convinced everyone that as the second hero, everyone would be safe with him. Marin didn't think he was a hero. Dahlia was surprised that the knight didn't know about heroes, becoming more and more astonished. Hero is a general term for those who bear the title of temporary hero, and out of respect, they are temporarily omitted and simply called heroes. But the appearance of heroes makes some tremble with fear. After all, it would not be an exaggeration to say that the very existence of heroes heralds the return of the king of all monsters, the Demon King. It is believed that heroes must defeat the Demon King when the time comes, so countries and guilds treat them with special respect and welcome them in every way possible. Anchorman was a level 75 warrior with many titles and very high stats. Marin had once seen a hero. Of the 5 heroes found, the second had already died, and the 4th had been killed by a monster. Therefore, only 3 remained. When the events moved to the dungeon, the adventurers were attacked by a swarm of monster bees. The Chaos group easily killed one bee after another, with Imarat smashing their heads with a single blow. The other adventurers were skeptical when they heard the name of the Chaos group, but they turned out to be quite good. If everything goes according to plan, while the hero and the bee ranks take down the bosses one by one, Imarat's group's task is to drive away the weaker monsters from them. The huge giant, the Dryad monster, was level 88 with an attack of 388 and defense of 332. The B ranks couldn't handle the boss, so the hero stepped forward and was about to deal with the enemy. With a single strike, golden swings of the sword enveloped the golem's body, cutting it to pieces. The adventurers praised the hero and his amazing strength, which had defeated the most evil boss of the dungeon. There was one Dryad left, who found the head of her kin. Tears streamed from her eyes, and a terrifying scream rang out. The adventurers were surprised that the monster had such feelings, but they were sure that the hero could handle her. The death of her companion caused the Dryad to grow stronger, her roots spreading around and launching an attack. Marin watched this and realized that this was the boss's reaction to the death of its companion. As it turned out, in this dungeon, 2 bosses had to be killed at the same time. The dungeon boss's level rose to 70, and Marin recommended not approaching her. Anchorman ordered the rank B adventurers to flee, because with their level, they would easily die in battle. Before the guild gave the order to clear the new dungeon, Anchorman bought all the information about the boss from the Thieves Guild in advance. The location of the boss, their number, and even the tactics, that both must be defeated at the same time. The hero decided to lie and reveal only part of the information. The adventurers were to blame for following him without checking anything. Now Anchorman wanted to kill the boss as a hero and increase his fame even more, but he was cursed. Even among the information he received, nowhere was it mentioned that the boss possessed spells, catching the hero off guard. Anchorman wanted to cut the vine that the boss was throwing him from side to side with, but he didn't have time to do so. The adventurers were frightened. The hero was defeated, so the raid was considered a failure. Marin realized that, at this rate, they would suffer huge losses, and suddenly he noticed that the life of one adventurer was in danger. The knight didn't know how much he needed to hold back, but he decided to resort to fencing anyway. A huge swing appeared right in front of the Dryad, cutting her powerful body in half. The rescued adventurer couldn't believe his eyes. The main character had defeated the level 70 boss with a single blow. Marin was a little disappointed, as he had not planned to put on such a show in front of the other warriors. A system notification appeared in front of Marin's face, granting him the title of Conqueror of the Dryad Garden. This was the very title that the hero had so desired, but Marin had taken it by his own efforts. Imatar praised the main character's strength, and Dahlia added that it was very impressive, even though Marin hadn't planned for such an outcome. The adventurers thanked Marin for saving them, as they could not have imagined that there was such a strong man in the C-rank squad. Defeating such a powerful boss, who knocked out the first hero with a single blow, was an incredible achievement. Some adventurers thought that the rumors about Marin were true, that even though he was a killer of his own kind, he did not attack others. Dahlia and Imitar immediately defended their ally, saying that he had saved them, and they had no right to spread rumors about him. Anchorman gritted his teeth. Right in front of him, the boss had been defeated with a single blow. He couldn't see the main character's level through the evaluation, and couldn't understand what trick he had used. The hero was angry at Marin, promising himself that sooner or later, the mysterious knight would pay for this. Returning home, the main character immediately started cooking. It took him a long time to extract the core. Although it was still raw, the core looked very shiny and smooth, and each nut was the size of his fist. Marin could not have imagined that on his way back, he would be lucky enough to encounter a Trent, a tree monster. First, he had to remove the hard outer shell, then manually remove the soft inner skin from each nut, and the preparation was ready. Later, he boiled the peeled chestnuts in boiling water until they were half cooked, and took them out before they became mushy. While the chestnuts were boiling, he had to pour water and sugar into another pot. Boil them over high heat to make a syrup, and as soon as the chestnuts are cooked, add them to the syrup. While frying them, pour the syrup over the chestnuts so that they are evenly coated with the glaze. When they reach the desired consistency, cover with a lid. While the ingredients are cooling, the sauce is being absorbed, so let the dish cool completely, repeating the procedure 3 more times until the chestnuts are ready. The result is Marin Glass's Tyrant. The shiny sugar glaze, even though he made it himself, makes Marin as happy as can be, and the taste that fills your mouth from the first bite is something blissful. The sugar syrup, applied in several layers, locked in the sweetness of the chestnuts, creating a rich and deep flavor. The chestnuts were soaked in syrup and boiled down, becoming soft and chewy. The main character rushed to Dahlia in the middle of the night and offered her some of his Trent chestnuts. Since it was a fruit, Dahlia could eat it, but the elf said that it didn't matter whether it was a fruit or a vegetable. Imotaro didn't particularly like sweets, and her younger siblings were asleep, so she couldn't treat them. Dahlia had to agree to try Marin's cooking, because he looked so pitiful after cooking late into the night. Although it was the fruit of a monster, it turned out to be sweet and tender, and the fragrant thick syrup perfectly complemented its sticky texture. Marin wanted to know if it was tasty, but Dahlia was embarrassed and said she just wasn't used to sweet things. But she did reveal that the nuts tasted like autumn and wanted to know the name of the dish, which was called Marin Glass. Dahlia actually loved sweets, but her mentor taught her to restrain her appetite. In her native forest, she was not even allowed to eat sweet strawberries. Her mentor was not strict. According to Dahlia, she was a serious person and still served as captain of the guard in their forest. Hearing that her mentor's name was Rosa, Marin took her by the hand and said that she had pink hair, a spear as a weapon, and the attribute of water. Dahlia was surprised because this completely described her mentor, and she immediately asked the main character how he knew this. The main character asked the elf if they could go to her native forest tomorrow morning. Early in the morning, Marin found himself in the central continent, the great forest of Izur. Once, he went on a mission with an elf. She was the best friend of his senior partner, a mage. He remembered her well because she fought with a spear, which was rare for elves. He asked Dahlia many times if she was sure it was the same person, assuming that she might not remember him. Soon, a woman with short pink hair and a spear in her hands stood right in front of the main character. Rose saw a man in a helmet. He was tall and slender like her kin. But why did he want to see her? The main character revealed his real name, Charlotte, greeting Rose, whom he had not seen for so long. Rose laughed. She remembered Charlotte and asked how long it had been since they last met. Putting her spear to the main character's throat, Rose asked him who he was to try to pass himself off as her old friend. She did know such a person, but that was 100 years ago. He could not possibly have lived to see this day. But if it really was Charlotte standing before her, the woman wanted to know what she called the Knight. The mage offered the main character to join their group because it was rare to find such a skilled tank as him. Charlotte immediately refused, but the mage suggested that he go on an adventure with them at least once. The mage added that if Charlotte went with them, he would be able to see other races, such as elves. There were no elves in his group, but they were his best friends, and Mr. Charlotte really wanted to see representatives of other races. Everyone outside the forest was crazy about elves, and Charlotte couldn't believe what he saw. After meeting her, Rose immediately said that Charlotte was too long and pretentious and would break your tongue. So from that moment on, she called the main character Charles, so as not to break her tongue. Rose truly believed that Charlotte was standing in front of her, with almost the same physique and voice, but he didn't look like an old man. The main character added that he was about 15 when they first met. He continued that the magician, his best friend, was then the youngest magician in the Tower of Magic. He loved Madeline cookies, but the only ones he didn't eat were the ones Rose baked. She also received so many letters from mercenaries that they could have piled up into a mountain. Rose definitely believed in him. Charlotte had a calm aura and a soft voice that contrasted with her innocent tone. It was really him, so the woman told the main character to go with her. She wanted to check something. Once they were in her house, the elf apologized that she couldn't offer him anything, as she was just sleeping in the house and didn't need anything. Rose lived alone on the edge of the forest, because from there, it was easier to watch the entrance to the forest as its guardian. 100 years had passed, and Rose had hardly changed, which was probably normal for an elf. Rose took Marin's hand. He really hadn't aged a day. She, as an elf, had lived for so many years, but his human body seemed frozen in time. Rose assumed that her friend Carl's was also alive and ageless, but Marin replied that he was already dead. Marin was the only one who had survived from the entire squad. Rose confirmed that it was foolish to hope that humans could live so long. Her life as an adventurer was short, and Rose almost immediately returned to the forest to settle down, so she only learned news about them from rare letters from Carl's. But at some point, his replies stopped coming. Rose waited, thinking he was just busy, but there was no news for 20 years. Charlotte's group, Romantia, disappeared, as if it had vanished into thin air. In those days, the disappearance of an entire squad of mercenaries was not uncommon, but the sudden disappearance of such an experienced group as Romantia caused a stir throughout the guild. At first, Rose didn't believe it and kept waiting for news, but too much time had passed to cling to hope. So now Rose is more surprised than happy. She wanted to know how Charlotte had lived for 100 years and not aged a day. The main character asked Rose if she remembered their last raid together and the rare item he had gotten. The one that fell to Marin from Regina Aranea, Queen of Spiders, was the book of the skill Arachnophobia. Rose remembered it. She was the only one in the group who had the appraisal skill, so she checked the item for Marin. The reason he was still alive and the reason his companions had died was that very book. Charlotte rushed forward, her mockery attracting the enemies, but they were faced with unusual goblins. Carls didn't understand what kind of monsters they were facing. The archer replied that it would be better to prepare a spell quickly. The hero asked everyone to calm down and tasked Charlotte with buying some time at the front. The archer's glowing rain began to shine on the battlefield, destroying the mutated goblins. After that, Carls used his Mole's Ignita spell, trapping the goblins behind a wall of bright fire. The customer had mentioned simple goblins, but they were faced with hordes of strange monsters. Carls didn't like this at all. These goblins were too different from what was in the description. There was no point in going any further. They had to take the corpse and return with evidence. Suddenly, they saw a stranger in a cloak who called it rude. She had spent a lot of time creating monsters, and the adventurers had killed them so cruelly. The archer asked the stranger who she was, as this was now a closed area where a sweep was being conducted. On command, Charlotte immediately stepped forward to defend her allies. The hero said that they were licensed adventurers who had accepted an order to exterminate the monsters. The girl turned and said that her sense of time was not like that of humans, so she did not notice the arrival of the adventurers. She was upset that they treated her test subjects that way. The archer tensed, and the priest immediately realized that they would not be able to cope with the sudden enemy. The monster took off her hood, saying that she was in the middle of a sacred ritual and that the pathetic humans had interrupted her. The assessment did not work on the monster. Her level was not revealed, and her race turned out to be a dragon. Not noticing the blow, Charlotte was immediately hit on the shield and thrown back. His armor bent, and his sword broke. The dragon said that peeping without permission, being human, was the height of insolence. But the people had come at the right time, as they would make excellent sacrifices for her great ritual. The hero ordered everyone to prepare for battle, and Demian to take care of the wounded Charlotte. The dragon realized that she had been too harsh with Charlotte, but even boring bugs had the right to know who was killing them. The stranger revealed that she was a golden dragon of wisdom, standing at the pinnacle of intelligence, even among her own kind. Carls was frightened, but the archer convinced him to pull himself together and not take his eyes off the unknown enemy. Carls understood that this was a real dragon, and that he needed to run away, but first he wanted to blind her with magic. The golden dragon was already behind Carls and pierced his chest, saying that, judging by his manner, he used magic even though he was human. The archer did not have time to draw her bowstring before the dragon pierced her neck with a single lunge. The hero did not see or hear the dragon's attack. Such was the true power of the mighty monster. The hero knew that at this rate, they would all be killed, but fortunately, the mage and the archer were still alive. Damian's mass healing could save everyone, but they needed to buy time, so she would have to draw the dragon's fire to herself, while Damian healed the vanguard. The hero asked what the golden dragon of intellect was doing in such a forest, and what it was after. The dragon shouted that she had only one desire, to resurrect the demon king. She was a golden dragon who had attained the wisdom of the entire universe, and one day it dawned on her. To truly purify this world, it was necessary to wipe out this dust called humanity from the face of the earth. But there was a being who had thought of this before, one who had long ago dedicated his life to fighting humans. The demon king. The dragon prepared a sacred ritual to fulfill his wish and resurrect the demon king. And in the process of preparation, her heart was stolen by this powerful personality. Soon the demon king will be resurrected, and she will become his wife. From now on, she was a dragon maddened by love, the insane dragon Salvatore, who was going to resurrect the strongest monster. While the dragon was spouting this nonsense, Damian managed to finish preparing for the mass healing. As soon as the magic worked, they would have a chance to escape. The golden dragon was busy preparing for the ritual, so she had no time for pathetic humans. The next moment, a spike from the ground pierced Damian's body. Damian died instantly, and the dragon asked sarcastically if he really thought she wouldn't notice his pathetic tricks. The hero swung her sword behind her back and tried to attack the golden dragon, who was smiling at the priest's corpse. But a blow from the heavens pinned her to the ground and knocked the sword out of the legendary hero's hands, breaking the entire group. The dragon said that in their death throes, humans resembled insects. She wanted to tear off their limbs for new experiments. The main character woke up and realized that they had no chance in a head-on attack against the dragon. But with this skill, Marin might be able to buy enough time to escape. Arachnophobia changed the knight's face. The assimilation debuff was activated, and he was no longer the same. When the debuff was dispelled, the main character came to his senses, noticing a human limb in his hands. Marin's body had changed. Night reigned around him, and he did not understand what had suddenly happened. His lower body had become spider-like, and his hands were covered in blood. There were many bones and corpses lying around his spider-like body. While Marin was trying to understand what was going on, the system informed him that he had received the title of Killer of his own kind. The main character realized that all these corpses in front of him had been killed by his own hands. Not far from him, he noticed an artifact, the shining hand of a saint. Instructed by the Emerald Stone of Purification, it can remove one type of negative status. Applying the system to himself once more, Marin learned that he was under the transformation of arachnophobia and possessed the attribute of darkness. This is a forbidden art that allows one to summon the power of the ancient monster, the spider Arachna. Come to think of it, it had just appeared in the status window, so Marin lost his mind and passed out. He woke up because the bracelet canceled the assimilation. The main character was just glad that he had regained consciousness, but soon, he noticed the corpse of the swordsman in front of him. Horror swept across Marin's face. Before him lay the corpse of the hero of humanity, whom he had killed. All he remembered was the battle with the dragon. Trying to find his comrades, Marin saw only their remains. When he came to, 100 years had passed. Rose's best friend, Carl's, his comrades, and many others. Marin didn't even know how many he had killed. Rose understood that it was difficult for the main character. He had kept this secret for over 100 years. Rose said that he had fought the dragon and used an unknown skill to protect his friends. She was sorry that things had not turned out as he had hoped. No one would blame him. He had done everything he could and even risked his life. So much time had passed, and Marin was stirring up the past again. Rose thanked him, because thanks to him, she finally understood why only he had survived. Marin reminded Rose of her question. She had wondered why Marin didn't take off his helmet, and the answer lay in his vague memories of the last 100 years. Everyone who saw his face called Marin a monster. He had lived among monsters for a century and decided that his face had become the same. He himself had not seen it for a long time. When the main character woke up and deactivated the skill, he wanted to go to the capital temple for purification, just in case. But he was afraid to show himself to anyone without looking at himself first, so he had to hide. Rose wanted to know if Marin had told any of his current allies about this, but he hadn't. The main character was afraid that if they saw his hideous face, their friendship might end. Rose thought that he shouldn't show himself to everyone right away, but should first reveal his face to his comrades. Now Marin was afraid not of his face, but of other people's reactions. If his comrades accepted him, then he would be able to accept himself. Marin didn't trust his comrades enough to reveal his face, but Rose convinced him that sooner or later, he would have to trust them. Rose also wanted to know why the main character was called Marin and not his real name. Marin took out a jar of nuts and said that was the name of the dish, surprising the woman a little. Rose sighed, because in reality, the knight had changed his name, thinking that his real one might be wanted. The mercenary squad disappeared, so Marin joined the adventurers. Then he met the beastmen Imitar and Dahlia, and they became a team. Rose wanted to know if Dahlia's posture had improved. Marin said that over the past 100 years, Rose had started smiling more often. Before, she had been much more sullen and prickly. A little later, the main character promised to visit Rose soon and said goodbye to her. Rose understood that Marin still did not trust his allies, but they trusted him more than anyone else in the world, and the rest was up to him. Marin walked and wondered if he would ever be able to show his face to Imitar and Dahlia, if he could change like Rose had done. When the main character returned, he found Imitar banging on the table in anger, wondering what had happened. He brought roasted chestnuts with him, and Dahlia immediately realized that these were the chestnuts from the trunks. The beast woman declared that Marin must hear the reason for her unrelenting anger. In the morning, she was at the guild, choosing a task from the board, and Anchorman took all the quests from under her nose. He was talking nonsense, saying that Imitar had broken the guild rules, so she shoved the evidence right in his face. Anchorman smirked and said he had made a small mistake. Laughing, he added that a hero like him couldn't have done it on purpose. Imitar wanted to kill him, just for being human. So petty, vile, and infuriating, it made the beastman even angrier. Dahlia added that instead of doing his job in the capital, the hero followed them around and provoked them, and he did it in such a childish way that he didn't even break the guild rules. Dahlia heard that this hero was not only bothering them, but apparently they had attracted the attention of some weirdo. While Marin and the girls were discussing the narcissistic hero, her younger brother managed to take a chestnut from the table. When Imitar wanted to take the chestnuts away from them, she noticed how her younger siblings were enjoying their sweet taste. Dahlia said that in any case, Anchorman wasn't here forever, so it was better to just wait it out. Marin wanted to know the story of the fallen hero, and Dahlia immediately realized that he was talking about the fourth one, who had been killed by the monster. The main hero folded his arms and interrupted the archer, wanting to know not about the fourth, but about the second hero. The knight suggested that the first hero had killed him, but Dahlia didn't think so. With his childishness, he wasn't capable of such a thing. Then, Marin was left with the question of who killed the second hero. Officially, the first hero made a mistake in the dungeon, but that hero did not look like a weakling at all. Dahlia revealed what she knew. There were rumors that the second hero had died at the hands of the third hero. However, it remained a rumor, because such a thing seemed impossible, but people suspected him for a reason. On the day of the second hero's death, a powerful lightning bolt struck the capital. The strange thing was that the day was absolutely clear, with not a cloud in the sky. In such a situation, one could only believe that the lightning was created artificially. Moreover, the third hero was known as a master of lightning magic. But, in contrast to his outstanding skills, his character was simply repulsive. He was a madman, capable of incinerating a person with lightning if they annoyed him. Therefore, people kept their distance from him, even though he was a hero. He was probably the only hero that people feared. The capital announced that the second hero had died defending a nobleman from a hired assassin, but most people are convinced that it was the work of the third. There were rumors that the authorities had covered it up, fearing his reaction to their clumsy attempts at prosecution. Imatar had never seen a normal person among the heroes, and if she saw Anchorman again, she would pull out all his hair. Marin added that Anchorman had a suspiciously large number of titles for his first run through the dungeons. Dahlia had a theory that the condition for receiving the title of hero was to have the title of Dungeon Pioneer. After all heroes had such titles until now. Imotar realized that Anchorman was furious at the thought of a new hero candidate appearing and was trying to grab all the first-time titles for himself.
If you think about it, it all makes sense. Anchorman believed that Marin had taken his title for completing the Dryad's flower garden. That's why he was probably mocking him, just to find a reason to fight.
The main character did not understand what was wrong with there being more candidates for heroes, and that this should be for the best. Suddenly, Marin remembered Rose's words about how he should learn to trust his allies as much as they trust each other.
No secret can be kept forever. Sooner or later, the day will come when the truth will be revealed. But even if a monster is hiding under that helmet, will they accept him as they do now?
Once in the dungeon, Imitar dodged the mutated slime, a level 39 monster that turned part of its body into spikes and hunted by jumping with incredible elasticity. Since it was a slime, Dahlia thought it would be a mud-level monster, but it was a mutant. The girl asked Imitar not to block her view, as she couldn't aim. The main character rushed forward, applying a magical flame enchantment to his blade. This species was completely unlike the slugs they knew. It could be a harbinger of the Demon King's resurrection. If so, he might soon meet that dragon again, if Marin found herself in the same hopeless situation. Imitar and Dahlia were weaker than his companions from the old group, and if this happened again, he would not be able to protect them. Dahlia immediately rushed to Marin's defense, pushing him away from the slug that was rushing at him at full speed. Imotar received a signal to prepare a fire spell. The beast woman said that if they didn't want to burn their skins, they should run faster. After the explosion, the adventurers were covered in pieces of slime, but everyone was fine. Dahlia asked the main character why he was counting crows in the dungeon, suggesting that he was dreaming of eating slugs. The archer's hand was injured, but she said it was nothing serious, that she had been hit a little earlier. The main character realized that it was his fault and asked Dahlia why she had come to his rescue. Imotar tried to heal the archer, while Dahlia tried to understand what the knight was talking about. In a dungeon of this level, he would never have been wounded. Besides, he was a tank. His place was in the vanguard. Dahlia said she wasn't an idiot, and her body moved on its own. She didn't even have time to think. Imotar noticed that Marin had not been himself since he met Dahlia's teacher. The main character apologized in the dungeon and didn't even try to justify himself, saying that he would be more careful in the future. Imotar wanted to know if something had happened, but suddenly Dahlia asked her allies to stop. Dahlia sensed the smell of monsters nearby. A group of adventurers was fighting a dark beast and was rapidly losing the battle. The man was surprised that reinforcements had not yet arrived. At this rate, the monsters would reach the wagon. The monster was about to kill one of the wounded adventurers, but a burst of power severed the beast's arm. Dahlia came to the aid of the adventurers, drawing the monster's attention to herself. Amitar immediately rushed forward, piercing the monster, created from matter, with her golden blow. The monster dissolved in front of her, then reassembled itself and attacked the beastman from above. But Marin arrived in time to help. Lunging forward, the knight managed to cut down the material monster. The dwarf approached Marin and said that he no longer knew what to do if the soldiers fell, but they had been saved. It was rare for Marin to help of his own accord, and the girls were surprised by this sudden decision. Someone got out of the carriage, and the knight immediately asked the girl not to get out, as it was still dangerous around. The girl immediately fell to her knees. They did not expect to meet such an important person here. Maron did not understand who was in front of her, and Dahlia and Imitar immediately became angry with him, telling him to watch his language. The girl said that everything was fine, as living in different lands, it was natural not to know the local customs. She introduced herself as Ophura, the daughter of Tatachi from the Kingdom of Gnomes, a master craftsman of gold. Dahlia thought she was a child, but who would have thought that she was the Lady Gnome herself? Marin still didn't understand who she was.
Ophura was a black magician from the Kingdom of Gnomes. Marin did not know from the beginning that she was not a human child.
Dahlia asked the main character why he would save a human, her hatred for them flaring up instantly, without the slightest hesitation. Emitar was not with them, as she was performing her duties as leader, having gone to the guild with a report.
When a lady gnome is involved, the guild will not remain silent either. From questions to explanations of the situation, Imitar must have had a hard time.
Marin couldn't believe that Ophira was really an adult, as she looked just like a child. Dahlia called Marin a fool. He shouldn't have spoken about the lady gnome in such a tone. The man laughed and said that he didn't mind if people thought they looked like children. He added that Lady Ophira the dwarf was undoubtedly an adult woman. She was already married and had children. In any case, the man thanked the adventurers once again, because thanks to them, the situation had not taken a serious turn. If the guards had been injured, he would have been very worried, so they had really helped them out. One of the guild administrators entered the room with Lady Ophira, saying that all the confirmation procedures for this case had been completed, and they could now go home. Lady Ophira learned the names of her rescuers, saying that she would never forget the names of her helpers. Before leaving, Ophira asked the children to take care of themselves, adding that little red things would suit them. The administrator deliberately sent Lady Gnome ahead because there was still a lot to check, so it would take some time. After a while, Imatar was still not there, and Maran was hungry, so he decided to have dinner. To Dahlia's surprise, the main character was holding a very ordinary salad, which he even offered to share. After thinking for a moment, the archer couldn't believe that there were any monster parts in this salad, so she decided to try the dish. The salad turned out to be really tasty, with perfectly balanced fresh vegetables, and even a spicy note. Dahlia also really liked that Marin used oil instead of dressing. Dahlia noticed that the main character rarely cooked anything so wonderful. She wanted to know what the soft things in the salad were. As soon as the archer found out that it was slime, she dropped her fork and was shocked. Maran didn't have enough ingredients for cognac, so he tried pouring chestnut juice on it like pudding, but it didn't turn out so well, so he chose the simplest and safest option, salad. The vegetables were ordinary ones bought at the market. The main character dried and chopped up the body of the eyeball demon he had caught in the Dryad dungeon and added it to the salad. Dahlia flew into a rage, asking the knight how he dared to feed her monsters again. Marin said that Dahlia herself had admitted that the salad tasted good, so what was there to complain about now? While the adventurers were arguing, Imotar came to them, so exhausted that she could barely stand on her feet. Imotar was exhausted. There were too many procedures related to testimony and paperwork at the guild. The girl decided to share some good news. Imotar Kitlet Kiroki had been promoted to adventurer rank B. When the Chaos group arrived at the guild, they were greeted by a smoking man named Hellion. Hellion was the deputy head of the Hexalum Guild, and he wanted to know if this was the same Chaos group that had saved the dwarf princess. Gelion handed Imotar a certificate promoting her to rank B. The beast woman was to keep it safe and not lose it, hoping that she would continue to accumulate significant achievements. Dahlia asked Imotar not to relax, because she would soon catch up with her. Imotar replied that by the time the archer caught up with her, she would already be S rank. Gelion asked if they knew the criteria for evaluating the group's rank. He didn't think it was time to celebrate. In an official group, if the members had different ranks, the group's rank was determined by the lowest rank among the members. This meant that the rest of them needed to raise their ranks as soon as possible to become a B-rank group. The main character wanted to ask Helion about the dragon that attacked Adorama 60 years ago, whether the deputy had any information about the golden dragon. Helion said that it happened before he was born, so he didn't know, but he had often heard stories about it. He only knew how terrible the situation in the village had been during the dragon's attack. Helia said that Daisy should know more about it. She had been in the guild longer than anyone else. The deputy studied the papers about Marin Glah and couldn't believe that such a strong adventurer had appeared so suddenly. Since his goal in searching for the golden dragon was quite unusual, Helion decided that he needed to keep an eye on him. The main character wanted to learn about Daisy's knowledge of the golden dragon. The elf was the one who had organized the records of that incident. Marin needed to know the location of the golden dragon. He wanted to know where it was after attacking Adorama. Daisy was surprised, asking if Marin was asking whether the dragon had been defeated or not. Rumor had it that the dragon had been defeated by adventurers 100 years ago, but Marin refused to believe it at first. If it was the same ancient mad dragon, Marin wondered what would happen to his desire for revenge. However, this information could be false. The report said that it had been defeated, but this entry was most likely made based on the situation at the time. During the battle, monstrous magical power was unleashed on the dragon, and when the flames subsided, everything became very strange. Only a crater remained at the site of the spell, and the golden dragon disappeared without a trace right on the spot. This meant that there was no corpse left, and since there were no attacks after that, the guild decided to count the order as successfully completed. The main character understood that human magic was not powerful enough to destroy the dragon's corpse, which meant that it was still alive. Marin wanted to clarify if there were any details about the dragon. Daisy said that there was no branch of thieves here now. The nearest large base of the Thieves Guild was in the city of Forgotten, in the western wastelands. More precisely, in the wastelands themselves in the west, for Totten had only one branch, so it was unlikely that they could move. This place served as a refuge for adventurers in the middle of a lifeless desert. However, the average level of monsters in the West is quite high. Therefore, the guild has introduced rank restrictions. To take orders in the West, you must have at least rank B.
The place is so dangerous that the guild has closed it off to free access. If Marin goes west, he will finally be able to learn about the mad dragon.
The main character set himself the goal of obtaining rank B as quickly as possible and getting to the city of Forgotten. A few days later, in the lobby of the Hexarim Guild, the Chaos group brought in many bags for orders. Over the past week, Chaos had completed nearly 10 orders. Because of them, the market was flooded with trophies from orcs and harpies, and prices had plummeted. The administrator himself did not understand how the group managed to work at such a pace without rest. Dahlia said that fulfilling a bunch of orders was one thing, but watching Marin eat was shaking her psyche. Just yesterday, Marin said he wanted to try a new type of slime and ended up catching all the possible negative effects at once. And even such a sad experience did not teach the main character a lesson. He continued to be obsessed with eating monsters. Dahlia asked Imorat to quickly learn the skill of removing curses. to which the beast woman sighed, realizing that it was indeed necessary. All the items on the order were confirmed, and Imorat submitted applications for rank advancement for 2 members of the Chaos Group. Imorat also saw lanterns being hung in the streets for the new Sun Festival, which would take place next month. The festivities would last for 2 whole weeks, but Dahlia didn't understand why they had to go to such lengths every year. Imorat was just thinking about taking a break, and this was the perfect moment. They had been working non-stop lately. Dahlia was all for it, because they didn't really get any rest except for the weekends. A lot of time had passed, but it was still celebrated. Marin remembered how, long ago, he too had celebrated this holiday with everyone else. But fortunately for the group, Ms. Dahlia and Mr. Marin had both fulfilled the necessary requirements and could now obtain rank B. The anchorman was just passing by and happened to hear about it, saying that he simply couldn't resist congratulating them in person. Dahlia asked the arrogant hero what he wanted, as if the past clashes weren't enough for him. The anchorman just stopped by to praise them for their efforts. Who knows? Maybe one day they'll grow up to be as great as him. Anchorman suggested that the main character show his face, something that had been on his mind for a long time. A mighty warrior who had fallen like snow on his head, and yet not a single living soul knew what he looked like. Starting with rank B, Marin became the guild's main combat unit. But how could the guild trust someone who didn't even show his face? Dahlia asked him not to talk nonsense. It didn't matter where he came from or what he looked like. Come to think of it, no one had ever seen Marin's face. Not only was he suspicious, but he also ate monsters, which aroused the suspicions of the Chaos Group. The administrator apologized for interrupting their conversation, but he confirmed Anchorman's words. In order to officially approve an adventurer for rank B, their identity must be confirmed. Therefore, when registering, it is necessary to record their appearance and distinguishing features. Dahlia asked if there was another way, if she, as an elf, could vouch for him. Even if Dahlia vouched for him, rules were rules. If it was difficult for Marin to do so in front of everyone, he could only show his face to the staff. The anchorman continued to press, saying that the Hexalim Guild was officially covering up a dangerous individual. If he was a dangerous individual with an unconfirmed identity, then for the safety of other adventurers, Marin had to show his face. The adventurers took his side, and Dahlia became angry because he was deliberately escalating the situation. Anchorman asked him to show his face to everyone if he had no good reason to hide his identity. Imorat said that Marin didn't have to listen to the Anchorman's nonsense. They would find another way to confirm his identity, whatever it took. The main character knocked Imorat's hand away and began to walk away, completely overcome by a panic attack. Anchorman said that such a reaction only made the main character more suspicious, since he couldn't show his face even in such a situation. They would have to submit an official request for an investigation to the guild. The Anchorman continued to press, and Marin could no longer take it and began to run away from the guild. Imorat became enraged, asking the hero how he dared to insult his comrade and threatening the anchorman. The arrogant guy declared that for a group that discriminates against people, this behavior was worse than inhuman. Dahlia stood up for Imitar and calmed her down before she started a fight with the hero. Everyone was watching them, and if Imitar laid a finger on the adventurer, the consequences for the group would be dire. Imitar told Dahlia that this man had brought their comrade to such a terrible state. Clenching her fists, Dahlia left, saying that she also understood the gravity of the situation, but that it was not worth taking hasty action now. The main character did not understand why he was running away. He knew that he would cause problems for his companions if he ran away, but he had no other choice. Marin remembered the time when he managed to dispel the spell of arachnophobia that had been on him for 100 years. The main character had to use the clothes of dead people to return to Adorama as quickly as possible. Touching his face, Marin did not understand what had happened to him. His face had changed in a strange way. Marin had to put on the nearest helmet, frightened by the thought that his face still looked like a monster's. Even if all members of the B-rank group, if the application is not approved, they will not be able to take on B-rank tasks. The main character was terrified of being judged by other adventurers if he showed his face. Marin imagined how, when he took off his mask, the adventurers would be surprised at how this monster dared to show up at the guild so brazenly. Turning around, the main character noticed Dahlia in front of him, who had barely caught up with him. The archer told Marin that if he took another step, she would shoot him in the leg. Soon, Marin returned to the room and apologized to his allies for his escape. Dahlia asked Marin how long he planned to avoid such situations, and she also asked if the main character was going to explain why he didn't want to show his face. Imorat asked him to at least give a reason, otherwise they would not be able to come up with a solution. Marin revealed the truth that he had been in an accident a long time ago, which is how he got the title of killer of his own kind. He had never killed anyone before, but since that accident, his face had changed and now resembled that of a monster. Marin continued, saying that in his memory, everyone who saw his face reacted as if they had seen an ugly monster. This was the reason why the main character was afraid to show his face. If they found out that his face was that of a monster, it could cause trouble. Since they were in the same group with him, Marin couldn't ruin the future of his allies. The main character suggested finding a new member for the group. Imorat slammed her fist on the table and asked the knight why he had decided this on his own. Dahlia was surprised that Marin had considered them so insignificant all this time, since they had even accepted the fact that he was human. Even if they now said they didn't care what his face looked like, as soon as they saw that ugly mug, their opinion might change. Imotar said that even if he ate monsters, His strange face was not a problem. The allies were even satisfied with the fact that he was human. So even if there was an ugly monster or a headless Dullahan under the helmet, they wanted to stay in the same group with him. It started again. Always the same thing. Even though he had been betrayed and deceived so many times with sweet words, the main character still wanted to believe in people again. Marin asked them to promise that they would not run away or scream when they saw his face. Still, the main character gathered his strength and took off his helmet in front of his allies, surprising them greatly. Rumors about Marin spread throughout the guild. The guy who ran away would show his face today. The elf and beastmen in his squad were known for their hatred of humans, which meant that Marin was most likely not human either, but his title of killer of his own kind proved otherwise. The hero asked the adventurers not to quarrel, as Marin was most likely just an ordinary innocent guy. In fact, Anchorman didn't care what race he was. What mattered was that he was a murderer. There had to be a reason why Marin was hiding his face, why he even had to run away. If he gave them a plausible reason, they would attack him themselves, and he would have to leave. Anchorman promised himself that he would make sure that the path to the guild was closed to him. Helion thought it was nonsense to make such a fuss over nothing. It would be better to channel that energy into completing tasks. The administrator asked Helion if he was okay, not knowing what had happened to Mr. Marin. But the Chaos Group was a very promising group of newcomers. Although there were rumors about the races of its members, they were very united. If he can't even show his face, then it's all for nothing. He asked the administrator if she knew why people preferred adventurers to mercenaries. It's all about trust. In the past, mercenaries often became bandits because of trifles or whims. Therefore, in wars and large-scale cleanups, they were used as cannon fodder. Adventurers, on the other hand, are less powerful in combat, but they are versatile. They take on any job, from investigations to hunting and gathering herbs, and they break the law less often. It is not surprising that more and more mercenaries are retraining as adventurers, and the Hexalim Guild has grown on this wave. Helion also disliked Anchorman, but the title of killer of his own kind, eating monsters, and an incomprehensible power alarmed him even more. They had enough reasons to intervene and stop him. They couldn't risk the guild's reputation for the sake of recruiting talent. Soon, the Chaos Group arrived at the guild, forcing all the adventurers to pay attention to them. It was brazen enough to show up here. Since Marin was now so brave, why did he run away last time? The administrator asked Marin if he was okay. He had been rejected so many times, and now in front of everyone. Dahlia asked Marin not to worry. They had already said yesterday that everything would be fine. Suddenly, some cups fell to the ground and broke because Marin had taken off his helmet. The anchorman had not yet seen Marin's face, telling people that no matter how scary the face was, it was rude to react so directly in front of the person. As soon as the hero opened his eyes, he noticed the incomparable face of the main character, whose delicate features made everyone admire him. An amazing face was hidden under the helmet, and the adventurers could hardly believe that Marin was human. The main character was much more beautiful than any local woman, even though he was of the opposite sex. Ematar said that there was nothing special about it, but Dahlia reminded her of last night. When the main character returned to the room, Marin suggested that his face was inexpressibly ugly, apologizing for making them look at such an abomination. Ematar grabbed the helmet and immediately threw it to the ground with all the strength she could muster. The beast woman warned the main character that if he ever dared to fool people again by hiding such a face, his insolent head would be knocked off his shoulders. Ematar was angry that Marin called his face ugly, and Dahlia could barely restrain her. Dahlia asked Marin where he got the idea that he had turned into a monster with such an appearance. Sometimes memories of that unfortunate accident would surface, and he would become confused. The past mixed with the present, and he forgot what he really looked like. Even when the protagonist tried to look in the mirror, fear prevented him from seeing his reflection. And if someone recognized him, he could be summoned to the royal castle and put on trial. His allies scared off other adventurers who thought he was like them. Anchorman couldn't take it anymore and ran away from the guild. He punched the wall with all his might, asking himself how Marin dared to mock him. The drunkard woke up from the loud bangs and angrily asked why the hero was making such a racket and breaking the wall. But Anchorman had no intention of listening to the nasty man, slitting his throat in a split second. The hero asked himself why Marin hid such a face under his helmet, even when he was cornered as a murderer with the title of killer of his own kind. Anchorman assumed that it had been a trap for him from the very beginning, because he had already stolen the title for the first time he passed through the dungeon, and now he had trampled his status into the mud and humiliated his reputation. The subject turned to the hero and asked Anchorman if he had finished his business in this city. The hero turned around happily and said that they could return to the capital. But first, the subject had to deal with the dead drunkard. The fool dared to point his sword at the brave man, so the subject said he would prepare the carriage as soon as he finished cleaning up. Now, Anchorman saw through the main character's plan. He was trying to steal his great and impeccable glory. The hero promised himself that he would show Marin what it meant to go against a brave warrior.